Thursday, April 28th, 2022. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 7th, 2022, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up to members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and we'll bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai has been excused. Mr. Cristiano.
Present.
Mr. Dorado.
Here.
Mr. Greenfield.
Here.
Mr. Husser.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Present.
Mr. Seaman.
Here.
Mr. Spanville.
Here.
Ms. Talenti.
Here.
And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all of those serving here and abroad and our first responders. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and
and
to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and justice
for
for
all.
all. Thank you. We have approval of minutes. First minutes for regular meeting, February 17th, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talenti, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make motion for approval of minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
I'm not sure who made the first.
I think I did.
Thank you.
Or Nick.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talenti,
Yes.
Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have regular minutes, approval of regular minutes for March 3rd, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Husser, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, and Ms. Talenti. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve minutes.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talenti.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, approval of minutes for regular meeting March 17th, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Mr. Castro, Mr. Seaman, Ms. Talenti, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yeah.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talenti,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. We have approval of minutes for regular meeting April 7th, 2022. Eligible voters are Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talente, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, do we have any vouchers today?
I have no vouchers.
Any correspondence?
Correspondence I do. We had carried Mr. Hammer's application to tonight because he was due to expire, but he granted another extension of time, and he asked that his application be rescheduled to May 12th, and that will be with notice because he was supposed to notice for tonight, and he expires May 31st. So that's just for the public to know that he is not being heard tonight.
Okay, has our, with that extension, does that mean that our survey team, our site team, I mean, is gone out to the site, or do they need to?
They have
reschedule?
not gone out yet. He's scheduled for May the 12th, so they
Okay,
might want to revisit that and let me know so I can get a hold of their attorney.
okay, Mr. Seaman, you were part of the site team, correct?
It's
Yeah.
me, Brian.
And
Yep.
okay. Do you-
Yeah. I'll reach back out with a couple dates that work for the group and we'll make it work.
Okay. Just keep in mind, it's before the 12th. Thank you.
Got it.
The other item is Allison Serrani, the deputy township clerk, has sent emails to everybody's township email address regarding their financial disclosure forms. They are due by Saturday, and if you don't get them in on time, you will be fined. So if anybody has any questions on what they're supposed to do, I would suggest that you get a hold of Allison tomorrow in the clerk's office. You can dial the main number and go to extension 2150 and ask for Allison, and she can help you, walk you through it. Okay?
Thank you.
And that's all I have for correspondence. We did have some ordinances, but I was told we can actually hold them till the special meeting. So Miss Beam will be at the meeting to explain them.
Very good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Chairman Tannenhouse, can I ask Eileen a question? Eileen, the Hammer application, so I understand it correctly, are they going to be providing new notice for the May 12th meeting?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so we don't have to carry anything this evening.
No, they're just being rescheduled.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have a resolution, case number SD-2990, FP Howell LC. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Castro, Mr. Seaman, Ms. Talente, and myself. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Roll
who
call,
was
please.
that? Joe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes,
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, submission waivers, case number SP-1103, Woodmont Senior Living LLC.
Hold on one second. I need to get the attorney on here. And he was here. I don't see him now. Okay. The attorney is Peter Wolfson. He's being brought into the meeting now.
Good evening. Peter
Good
Wolfson,
evening.
Peter Wolfson from Dave Pitney here on behalf of the applicant Woodmont Senior Living.
How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good, thank you.
With me
Uh,
tonight also are Steve Vernakis from Woodmont and Dennis Keenan, our engineer. Perhaps they can be added as panelists.
Mr.
Uh,
Chairman, if we could, perhaps Steve could just swear me in and I can go through the submission waivers.
Sure.
Sure. Laura Newman, do you swear or affirm that any testimony provided for the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much.
So, Mr. Chairman, we provided a report dated March 31st, 2022. I actually had the opportunity to go through these submission items with the applicant, and they have since provided the 2,000-foot downstream drainage analysis, which is one of the items I did want to see. We talked about some of the administrative items like email of owner, applicant, and use designation of properties within 200 feet, noting that that could be provided on a subsequent submission. So with the submission of the downstream drainage analysis, specifically item 60, I take no exception to the granting of the balance of these waivers for the purposes of deeming the application complete.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, does that suffice?
Absolutely. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
We need a motion just to approve the submission waivers. So move.
Yes, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
I will second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado. You're muted, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Counselor.
Thank you very much. So with the granting of those waivers will be deemed complete and placed on a future agenda for hearing.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Okay, applications before the board. I'd like to make a change to this. We have case number SD-3001, Robert Weiss. It's a small application, and I have a conflict of interest. So if it's okay with the board, let that application go first, get that one out of the way, and then we'll have the rest of the evening for the remainder of the applications. Vice Chair, the meeting is all yours.
All right.
And that is Mr. Cohen, and Rob Siv is the engineer.
Good evening, Todd. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board professionals. I'm Todd Cohen, the attorney for the applicant, Robert Weiss. We have a minor subdivision application creating two conforming lots, one with an existing residence and one will be a new building lot on West 2nd Street in the Freehold Acres section of town. We have received the CME review letter of February 7th and the Avakian letter of April 27th. I have Mr. Siv with me this evening, and we're prepared to make a brief presentation to the board.
Okay.
Could we have Rob sworn in, and then I can put his qualifications on the record?
Sure. Mr. Siv, can you please raise your right hand? Mr. Siv, do you swear or affirm that any testimony provided for the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Rob, can you just briefly put your qualifications as a professional engineer on the record for the board?
Sure. I'm a licensed professional engineer, professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I have over 25 years experience in the engineering field. I've testified before numerous boards, including this board in the not too past future or past.
We'll accept your credentials, Mr. Siv. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, could you briefly describe the application this evening before the board?
Sure. The site is identified as Block 110, tax lot 29.01, and is more commonly known as 115 West 2nd Street. The site is situated within the R50 residential zone, has an area of approximately 20,360 square feet with 100 feet of frontage along West 2nd Street, and was created as part of a minor subdivision in 1988. The easterly portion of the subject property is currently developed with a one-story, two-bedroom, single-family dwelling and a paved driveway. That dwelling is served by the recently installed public sanitary sewer and public water systems. There are no environmental constraints affecting the property, and the surrounding developed properties are zoned similarly to R50 residential properties. It is the applicant's intention to essentially subdivide the property in half, creating two new lots, with new lot 29.03 having an area of approximately 10,460 square feet with 50 feet of frontage along West 2nd Street and would contain the existing dwelling. New lot 29.04 will have an area of about 9,900 square feet with 50 feet of frontage also along West Second Street, and will be developed with a future single-family dwelling. There's no architectural plans for the future house, but both proposed lots will conform to the R50 zone requirements, and that new house will be served by the existing sanitary sewer and public water systems. That is really the application in a nutshell. CME has done a letter dated February 7th, 2022. If the board wants, we can go through that if there's no other questions, or like I said, we can go through the letter if that would probably answer most of the questions.
Any board members have any questions for Mr. Siv?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Laura?
Robert, you're going to go through the waiver relief that it's required?
Yeah, I was gonna hit that first in your letter, yes.
Okay.
Want me to do that now?
Please.
Okay. The waiver requests are outlined on page 3 of Laura's report. They're about halfway down. There's 3 waivers listed. The first waiver is item A, section 188-119C of the code, which indicates no driveway shall be constructed closer than 5 feet from any property line, where there are 2 proposed driveways, and the turnaround areas for the proposed driveways are about 2 feet to 1 feet off of the property line. The main part of the driveway is more than 5 feet off the property line, but I did provide backup turnaround areas for each of the new driveways. Those backup areas are less than the 5 feet required. I did that to obviously help with the maneuvering of the backup of vehicles, but also I didn't shift it towards the middle of the lots because there are some utilities in that area, and it keeps about half to a third, 2/3 of the front of the house open for view without having the cars in front of those houses. I can either shift them, the whole driveway, to provide the 5 feet, if that's the board's pleasure, but I think it would be a little better if that waiver was granted for just that turnaround area. Like I said, it's not the main part of the driveway, it's just the turnaround area. I'm not sure if anybody has any specific questions as it relates to that, or Laura, if you have any comment.
Rob, if you could just go through my report in its entirety and then let the board opine on any questions. So understanding that relief. Again, the next one deals with curbing, no sidewalks provided.
Sure, I
correct?
can go through each one, absolutely. The next waiver noted is section B, section 188-125 indicates that curb, either concrete or Belgian block, is required. There's no curb in the area along West 2nd Street for this part of Howell. We are asking for that waiver. Similarly, item C is section 188-132A, which is for providing sidewalks. We are asking for the waiver for providing sidewalks. Again, this is not an area of town that has sidewalks along the streets. We're asking for that waiver. It looked kind of unusual for this one lot to have sidewalks in front of it. Those are the 3 waivers outlined on page 3. The rest of page 3 and on the top of page 4 are the submission waivers which were previously granted. So I will jump to the bottom of page 4, which is item number 6 in Laura's report. 6A just asks for the subdivision history of the tract. As I indicated earlier, the property was subdivided in 1988. There were 2 existing houses on the property. In 88, they subdivided the property to create 2 separate lots for each of those houses. And the remaining tract is where we're subdividing again today. Item B indicates the parking standards in accordance with the residential site improvement standards. The existing house is a 2-bedroom house. There is no garage on that house. We are proposing an 18-foot wide driveway, which has enough width to park 2 vehicles, which meets that standard. The new lot, we do not have architecturals for that house, but it'd be anticipated to have probably a single garage. And then again, it's a 2-car wide driveway. So there's ample parking for what could be up to most likely a 4-bedroom house for that lot. Going to page 5, item C asks if the new house is going to have a basement. Again, there's no architectural plans. It's unknown at this time. As part of the plot plan procedures with the township, if a basement's proposed, it'll be addressed at that time. And then soil logs will have to be done to determine seasonal high water table at that time. D asks about the existing and proposed stormwater management of the property, including the need for any dry well systems. There's obviously no stormwater management at the property as it exists today. As part of the development of the proposed lot and at the time of plot plan preparation, a dry well with soil loss can be provided for the new dwelling at that time. Item 5E is asked if there's any anticipated tree removal that would be required as part of this application. There would be one tree that is proposed to be removed as part of the driveway for new lot 2903. So there is one tree that will be removed to accommodate the new driveway for the existing dwelling. Item 5F is ask the ownership of the existing fences. The fence along the easterly property line is owned by the applicant and it's proposed to remain. All other fences around the property are owned by the adjacent property owners and are subject to, their ownership. Item 5G brings up the need for curb sidewalk along West 2nd Street. Again, we're asking for that waiver. There's no curb sidewalk in that area. That road was just recently paved as part of the sewer and water installation, and we are asking for that waiver. 5H is architectural plans, which I indicated there are no architectural plans for the new house. Obviously, they would be submitted and prepared as part of the plot plan when that time comes to develop that lot. And then the last one in 5 is 5I. The only outstanding or outside agency that we have for this application is the Monmouth County Planning Board, which issued an exemption letter on December 27th of last year, obviously indicating they have no interest in this application. So that takes us through the discussion items in item, item 6. I'm going to item 7. There's a couple technical comments. You want me to go through each one of them as well?
Do you agree to comply, including the street and providing the street tree?
Yes, we do, other than obviously they're requesting the waiver for 7E, which is the curb sidewalk. And
That's only if the board felt that it was necessary that be provided. So with the agreement to comply, Mr. Chairman, I really have nothing further. I would note that there is, this is a relatively small street and there is no curbing or sidewalk in that area.
Yeah, if anybody on the board has any opinion, I kind of leaning towards what Laura just said. I know the area well. I think I'm fine with not having a sidewalk or curb, but if anybody else feels differently, please chime in.
It would look odd if there were a sidewalk and curb there.
Seeing none. Any other questions, comments? Christine, Laura, Shari, anything else?
I
I have no comments, just I think, given the location, it's fine that they don't provide sidewalk and curb. Typically, we'd encourage, the creation of sidewalk, but it doesn't really make sense here.
Agreed. Seeing none. Mr. Cohen, anything else on this?
Mr. Chairman, that's our presentation this evening. Again, there's no variances or anything, so we'd ask that the application be granted. We comply with the representations made regarding Laura's letter.
Thank you, Todd. I guess we have to open it up to public question comment at this time, Eileen.
Yes, so. The chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public wanting to ask questions or comments on this application. If you have any questions or comments, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling in, you can use *9 to raise and lower your hand, *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Once again, you will be sworn in, required to give your name and address, and you need audio and video.
Give it about a minute, but I have a feeling we're not going to see any hands being raised.
I don't think so.
I'm good with closing the public portion right now.
Okay, at this time, the chairman has closed the public portion of the hearing.
Okay, Mr. Cohen, if anything else, if not, I'll take a motion to approve or entertain a motion, I should say.
I'll make motion for
Thanks, Joe.
approval.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Brian. Roll call.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser, sorry, Chairman Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
and Ms. Talenti.
Yes.
Motion carries. Application's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Rob. Okay, I guess we have to get Mr. Tannenhouse back online here.
Yes. I'll text him.
Okay.
There he is.
Everyone. It looks like audio video is not going to behave today. It was a little while ago.
Madam Secretary, I have another witness I have another witness as well, Tom Hunt.
Okay.
Thank you. And if there is a Justin Osceola, I don't know if he's on or not, but if
He
you could-
is. Hold
Okay,
on
that'd be
one
great.
second. I saw him earlier. Yeah, he's here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You getting ready to go?
Yes,
We waiting for me.
waiting for you.
By all means. Mr. Herbert? Or-
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. How is everyone tonight? Mr. Chairman, my name is Michael Herbert. I'm with the law firm of Parker McKay. And I have, we are here, I think, for the fourth meeting on the Wadsworth Development Ramptown application. This is it's a 10-lot subdivision with 8 new homes. We have been before the board, as you know, several times on this matter. We have 3 witnesses tonight: our engineer, Walter Hopkin, our environmental specialist, Dr. Thomas Hunt, and our planner, Justin Osceola. So, Steve, I always mess up your name. I apologize.
Don't worry about it. It's
Tom Balakin. Tom
That's fine.
Balakin.
Now, I know Mr. Hopkins was previously sworn, so all I
Sure.
need him to do is acknowledge he remains under oath.
Yep, I have, I believe Dr. Hunt was sworn, as well as Mr. Osceola as well.
Okay,
So-
as long as each witness acknowledges they remain under oath, they're all good to go.
Okay. Mr. Hunt does, Justin,
Yes, I do.
and Walter.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Okay, they have all acknowledged. I believe, Mr. Chairman, we continue to have jurisdiction in this matter. We appreciate the board hearing us again tonight and appreciate everyone's time on this matter. As the board will recall, this application has come before the board at beginning last year. We had several hearings on the matter. Making sure I have the dates. I think our last date was February 17th, 2022. I believe the application, we began back in August and had a meeting in November, and then the February meeting, and now we're back before you. And this application has been a conversation between the applicant and the board to find the best way to develop this property. We have tried to work with both the board and members of the public on this matter. And I believe we now have a plan to present to you that satisfies what we believe are all of the issues in this matter. We have the Avakian letter of February 10, 2022 that we've already addressed at the last hearing. We also have the latest CME Associates letter on this application, which is April 22, 2022. We just received a letter from DEP on the one environmental issue, so we have that available for the board to review. We have just put together just an overall colorized site plan that we sent in, I believe, yesterday. Just that is going to be our exhibit to present, just so the board can see overall what we're doing. Mr. Chairman, with that, I was just going to move forward with the application. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we're going to rely upon Ms. Newman's letter of April 22, 2022 to go over the remaining issues in this matter. And I just, for the record, wanted to state that I really appreciate both her and Ms. Bell's work with us on trying to get this application to where everyone is satisfied with it, and the fine work that they've done. They've been a pleasure to deal with. For the CME Associates letter, we have on page 4, we have a number of issues that need to be addressed, and I was going to present Mr. Hopkin to begin addressing those. Walter, good evening.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Herbert and members of the board.
Mr. Hopkin, if you could just share with us your latest colorized subdivision plan. If he's allowed to do so, Madam Secretary.
Is that the one from today?
Yes.
Then we can't use it. It's not 48 hours.
All right.
With the remote meeting, we have to have them 48 hours ahead. Sorry.
All right. Walter, do we have a subdivision that we can present to at least show what are the changes that we've made?
Yes, I'll just be referring to the black and white plans that the board has received, prepared by my office, last revised March 11th, 2022. And I apologize for not submitting the rendering in time. I think at one point this meeting was scheduled to be in person and just it slipped between the cracks.
All right. So is it possible to share that subdivision plan on the computer? The March 11th subdivision plan?
Do you want to do it, Walter? Or do you? Okay.
Got it, I think. Good.
Thank you. Okay, Walter, if you could explain what we originally proposed and what we, how we have now changed the site to try to comply with board comments and the public's comments.
Of course, Mr. Chair, just if you would, is there any need for me to reorient the board and to the property, or I would think by now everybody's aware of it?
I'm not sure. We do have some new board members.
We can do that. Walter, why don't we then reverse a bit and start from the beginning as to where this property is located, what is surrounding it, and what we propose.
Sure, of course. The property is a 20.06 acre site. It's at the corner of Ramtown Greenville Road and Michelle Court. It also backs up to Kosminski Way, which is the access drive to the middle school. There is an existing home and some buildings along Ramtown Greenville Road, and it's known as 238 Ramtown Greenville Road. It's also known as Block 3, Lot 25, and the property is located in your ARE2 zone. Again, just to orient, to the north is the elementary school. To the south is Michelle Boulevard, and there's a subdivision there of approximately 1.25 acre lots average. To the east, across the Ramtown Greenville Road, is your R3 zone, which is a higher density. There's a development that's approved, but that hasn't been built there. And to the west of the property is the middle school.
All right. And Walter, all of the proposed homes are oriented towards Michelle Boulevard. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Walter, there was an issue early on in this application with regard to access to Michelle Boulevard. We have researched the issue and we do find that we do have access to Michelle Boulevard. Is that correct?
Yes, my office prepared the survey for this, and in preparing the survey, we researched not only the a title report and deeds for this property, but as a matter of course, in preparing any survey, we would research the surrounding and adjacent properties as well, including the subdivision map for the Michelle Boulevard subdivision, and we're confident that this property has clear access to Michelle Boulevard.
And Walter, you've had an opportunity to review the existing buildings on the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is the applicant's plans with regard to the existing buildings that are on the property right now?
So I think there was some back and forth with the board, and I hope we're clear about this and are addressing what the board would like. There are, and if I can, I'm going to switch back to the existing conditions map. So you can see that there's a lot going on here. There's various buildings, there's a garage, there's fences. This is what exists there today. What the applicant is proposing to keep is only the existing dwelling at the corner of Ramtown Greenville Road and Kosminski Way. And there's we'll call it a garage or a masonry structure that's the closest one to Ramtown Greenville Road. I think there was some confusion because we label a couple of these one-story masonry structure, but it's just the one closest to Ramtown Greenville Road that we would propose to remain. The rest of the buildings would be removed.
All right, and are we, what are we doing with the remaining buildings? Are we upgrading them at all, or?
The existing building, my understanding is that this masonry structure would be, the exterior would be resurfaced. I'm not sure if there's any specific plans for the dwelling itself.
Okay. All right, now scrolling back out, if you could explain to the board what we originally proposed and what we are now proposing.
So if the board, if I can just go through what the lots themselves are all, the configuration of the lot lines are exactly the same as we originally proposed. The lots up front on Michelle Boulevard and are approximately 1 acre lots. There's a remaining approximately 10-acre lot, which the dwelling that fronts on Ramtown Greenville Road would remain on. It would be the open space lot in accordance with your ordinance, and it would be deed restricted from further development or disturbance. What we did in the matter, of course, in revising this application, the original proposal was to orient the homes closer to Michelle Boulevard in accordance with your setbacks, but it did appear to require relief from your 100-foot buffer. Through the feedback from the residents, from your professionals and the board, we've moved the homes back. They're approximately 150 feet away from Michelle Boulevard. This allows us to retain a significant amount of vegetation along Michelle Boulevard. The only vegetation that would be removed would be for the driveways, which would access the homes in the rear. What the board also saw at the last application or the last hearing was the project had rain gardens, which are small depressions used for stormwater and water quality. Those were oriented along Michelle Boulevard. We've eliminated those in that location completely and are dealing with the stormwater from the driveways through permeable pavement. A permeable pavement is a type of pavement that actually allows water to go into it. It's one of NJDEP's best management practices, and it allows the water to go into the ground without running off. Your professionals have asked us about the maintenance for this, and there will be an item put into the deeds that these driveways cannot be repaved with traditional pavement and that they cannot be seal coated. There'll also be a homeowners association associated with this, and they would be responsible for the maintenance of these permeable pavement driveways. There was also some small rain gardens in the rear of the lots to allow water to go into the ground from the homes and the runoff from the ground. Again, back and forth with your professionals, rather than several of these on various lots, we've proposed one infiltration basin, very shallow, in the rear of the properties and actually off of the individual properties, and it will remain on the open space lot. It was also suggested that your professionals requested that we make all of our stormwater management designs in the worst case scenario. And what that includes is that although the application does not have your maximum amount of impervious, it is possible that future residents would come in and propose pools or additions. So all of our stormwater management has been designed to anticipate 15%, which is your maximum allowable impervious. What we also have done is, although these stormwater management measures allow for the water to go into the ground and we've tested the soils, we've assumed that no water goes into the ground. So all of these have the volume to contain the 100-year storm. I think I neglected also to say that the homes, the front of the homes do go into an underground roof leader system, which has not changed since the original application. And that's a series of pipes oriented along the front of the homes, but behind the 100-foot buffer, and that directs water directly into the ground.
And Walter, with regard to the front of the homes, the driveways themselves will be pervious pavement, is that correct?
That's correct.
And we will deed restrict those, the pervious pavement driveways so that the homeowners cannot seal them or replace them with impervious driveways. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please continue.
The homeowners association that will be formed as part of this would be responsible for maintenance and upkeep of all of the stormwater management measures. Your professionals asked for an operation and maintenance manual, which we would prepare as any condition of approval and make sure that it complies with not only their requirements, but NJDEP's as well. Another suggestion in reviewing this and trying to perfect this application with your professionals was that they noticed that several cuts within the roadway would be required to access water, sewer, and gas with these 8 new homes. And so what's proposed now is a mill and overlay from curb to curb along the entire frontage of the property on Michelle Boulevard. There was some relief that was required with the prior submissions, and we've eliminated all of that relief with the exception of 3 items. So I don't know if the board or Mr. Herbert would like to ask questions on what I've presented so far, or if you'd like me to go into the relief that we would require.
If you could, Walter, if you could go into the relief, that would be great.
So your ordinance permits, your ordinance requires tree replacement and has the option of either tree replacement on site or a monetary contribution. However, relief is required for the monetary contribution. We believe that we've proposed the amount of trees that this site can maintain without putting trees in that are in danger of not surviving, and would suggest that the board grant relief and accept the monetary contribution. Your ordinance also has a very specific requirement as far as the driveway pavement section. It does not anticipate permeable pavement, so I just assume it hasn't caught up to DEP's rules yet. So we would require relief from your ordinance with regard to the permeable pavement driveway section. We would comply with NJDEP's section, just your ordinance doesn't contemplate this. And there is relief that appears to be required, or it's been identified by your professionals with regard to the infiltration basin in the open space land. As I read the ordinance, I'm not convinced that it specifically prohibits tree clearing, but in deference to your professionals, we would accept, of course, their interpretation and request that relief. And we'd just like to point out that it does not prohibit tree clearing. It just indicates that tree clearing and disturbance shall be preserved wherever possible. We would, of course, deed restrict this from further development or clearing in accordance with the ordinance that's cited. And just want to point out that your ordinance does also allow primary residence and accessory structures on the open space lot.
And Mr. Chairman, we also have with us Justin Osceola, our planner, if you want him to address that ordinance any further from a planning perspective.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Walter.
Those are the 3 areas of the township's ordinance that we require relief from. Again, I can take questions. I believe I've hit all of your professionals' comments within their letters. If you prefer that I go through them line by line or ask your professionals if there's specific items that I haven't addressed, I'd be more than happy to.
And Walter, we still have to address the phase 2 assessment, and we have Dr. Hunt on for that. So we, board members, we will be addressing that a little later on in this application. Walter, with regard to trees, I know that the township's tree expert, Ms. Sherry Spiro, has reviewed what we are proposing, and I know you'll be working with her to make sure that we plant the maximum amount of trees that can be planted on the site, so that we are in compliance with the ordinance as much as possible. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have an in-house landscape architect who likes to have these properties well treed, and we feel we've done the best that we can, but we're always open to more and could meet with Ms. Spiro if necessary.
And Ms. Spiro is very good at that as well. So I think you'll probably have a good meeting of the minds.
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to go through the other issues. Mr. Chairman, at that point, if that is our initial engineering testimony, if you wish to have questions of the engineer, he is available for questioning.
Okay, I'll let Ms. Newman take over.
Go ahead.
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, do you need to be sworn in for this application?
I think I was previously sworn. So happy to hear that the applicant is willing to comply with the technical comments within our report. Most of my comments, I think, will be followed up by the board planner and or the planner, Mr. Osiello. Mr. Hopkins testified that it's really just clearing in that open land area, but it's clearing for an infiltration basin. So it's clearing and it's drainage. I did just want to note, as it relates to clearing, there's approximately 6.16 acres of clearing, trees to be cleared with this. With the moving of the infiltration basin to the open space lot, I think it resulted in an additional 2 acres of clearing on this site. 328 trees are proposed to be planted, which leaves them with a deficit of approximately 390 trees, ultimately yielding a contribution to the board see fit of 117,000. I know we're going to hear from the environmental consultant. What appears unclear is whether additional clearing will be required for any remediation that would be required. And again, the reason why I think our ordinance, and I do recognize the permeable is recognized by the DEP as a green infrastructure. I'm happy to hear that there will be a deed restriction. The concern is these are very maintenance intensive. And when homeowners don't understand the level of maintenance, which is required, within 2 to 3 years, they end up paving them. And then we took what would be a green infrastructure to promote infiltration, and it gets paved over. So happy to hear that there would be a deed restriction imposed. And with that, Mr. Chairman, again, this was like a 7th review. So you'll see we only have a couple of technical items, most of which have to deal with the environmental and the stormwater report review. Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
What is the pipe that looks like it's going from the existing storm in the street back to the infiltration basin? Is that trying to take some of that runoff off of Michelle Boulevard and bring it to the infiltration basin?
I believe that's an outflow.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you for pointing that out. So I didn't go into the detail of the finite details of the infiltration basin in the rear. So it is designed, of course, to assume that 15% of the site is impervious. It is designed to assume that no water goes into the ground, although we've designed it to allow that. It is designed to accommodate the entire 100-year storm, but there was a suggestion that in case all of that fails, that over the 100-year storm, that this would accept water out to Michelle Boulevard as an overflow rather than into the existing inlet or the storm sewer system, rather than the water overflowing into other areas of the project.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that storm sewer system the other neighborhood's system that goes back to their basin? And didn't they provide testimony that they were having issues with their basin?
I do know that they had indicated that they have problems with their basin. I don't know, this is the storm sewer system that we're tying into is within the public right of way. this entire site with the exception of a small portion in the northeast corner of the site currently drains towards Michelle Boulevard. And we're reducing our flows in accordance with your ordinance, DEPs, and we actually exceed the standards that are in your ordinance as well as DEPs.
Yes, Mr. Hopkins, we were concerned about what the comments were from the public with regard to Michelle Boulevard and any water that may flow there. And this site seeks to make sure that that is not an issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you guys have confirmed that storm system is not part of the other neighborhood HOA responsibility to maintain. That is a public storm sewer system that you're tying into?
It's within the public right of way, as far as I know it is, yes.
Okay. I don't know how to get the answer of yes or no, but I guess somebody from the public hopefully is listening and will provide us some opinion on that.
And Walter, if for some reason that pipe cannot be used, the system can still contain the 100-year storm. Is that correct?
It's designed to accommodate the 100-year storm. If it were to overflow, it would overflow in this area, which is still part of our site. At some point, there's a detention basin. I don't know if it's Michelle Boulevards or the middle schools in this area over here. So it would actually overflow if any storm over the 100-year storm and the infiltration didn't work, it would overflow basically into the detention basin.
So let me ask Ms. Newman a question. Ms. Newman, I'm not a stormwater management engineer, so please excuse the layman's questions. The 2,000 foot drainage analysis, is that not supposed to look 2,000 feet in either direction, or is it to look at 2,000 feet as the water flows off the property and take a look at where that water flows 2,000 feet away and provide an analysis of what that would look like?
That is in fact the goal of that. It's just downstream. So it's the goal of a 2,000 foot downstream drainage analysis is to show that in the event the basin failed, where does this water go? And what are the impacts? What's the first structure it goes to, the next structure? In this particular case, the site is designed fully compliant through the 100-year storm event. This storm pipe that's being in only would convey water in the event of an overtopping, so beyond the 100-year storm event. What I'm hearing is if they eliminated the pipe, they'd have overland flow. Do we know the full mapping and the impacts of that? I think the answer is no. I think previously on one of their designs, we had that comment. You have to have overflows and where the flow is going to go specifically designed. In this particular case, because there was an available drainage system and because they were fully compliant up to the 100-year storm, and this was an overflow from that, they opted for the firm connection into getting the water to the next downstream structure as opposed to an overland impact of that water.
Okay.
Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, any other questions for our engineer?
The HOA requirements of dealing with all the stormwater, is there some type of bond or something that the HOA must maintain in order to make sure that there's appropriate funding to maintain all this fancy stormwater management stuff?
You have the commitment that we're going to create the HOA, and the HOA will be legally responsible for making sure that this is taken care of. I don't know of any bonding requirement that the HOA may have. Ms. Newman, is there anything in the township's codes or ordinances that require such a thing? If we're required to do so, we will do so.
So I just want to confirm, so this open space lot will be owned and maintained by your HOA, correct?
Correct.
Our ordinance does not speak to a requirement that they allocate funds for that unless it was going to be dedicated to the municipality. So what they're obligated to do is prepare an operations and maintenance manual, establish a homeowners association. Typically, they provide an easement to the township in the event that the town ever had to go in. And it's the town typically has to maintain under the DEP regulations to ensure that they're doing the proper inspections and maintenance of these facilities, but there's no separate funding by our ordinance that's required for privately maintained systems.
There's also a variance that's required in order for us to accept the permeable driveway as well, right?
There's a variance, I think arguably, it's a design waiver. And I think arguably it is compliant with the DEP and the RSIS regulations would allow for this to be a permeable surface. So I would certainly, maybe we should hear from our attorney. I think it gets usurped by the RSIS regulations, which would allow it because it's a residential development. Where you are correct, Chairman, is in order to put the basin in this location, though, it's my opinion, and we can certainly hear from Christine, that they then don't have the required open space dedication, which requires a variance.
I would agree with Laura, because that is, that is putting in infrastructure on the open space lot.
So if I may, we do have an alternative to that. That basin could be shifted onto those lots that they're parallel to. If the board can see my hand, it could just be shifted down here with an easement. We just felt that putting it on the open space lot, which was owned and maintained by the homeowners association, really kind of took away any of the issues that one homeowner might have with another as far as maintenance or encroaching upon the basin. This way, it's completely off of their lots.
Fair enough. Thank you. Ms. Newman, do you concur that's a better option?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think there has to be planning testimony which would support why it needs to be there. I mean, the answer isn't, well, we should just take a basin, shift it onto and have it encroach upon the rear yards of potentially 4 lots. That was their prior design. And while it may technically comply, I have concerns about the practicality of that and what happens from a maintenance perspective. This is not something the board typically sees. Typically, when we have subdivisions, basins are on their own lot, whether they're owned privately or owned by the association, that's what we see. So this is the typical design we are accustomed to seeing. It's just in putting it on this open space lot, it creates a variance.
And how will somebody get back to maintain it? Is that 10-foot wide drainage easement? Is that going to be the way for people to get trucks or machinery back there to repair the basin if they need to?
We do have, as you've identified, an easement here. Although there is vegetation, there is frontage. Oh, I'm sorry, there is not frontage there. So yes, it would be the 10-foot easement.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Brian, just one thing that you hit on before. I mean, just because a storm sewer system is in a public right of way, how do we find out the answer of who owns that thing? I mean, it sounds like we're going back to 2 meetings ago where across the street's going to say something and applicant's going to say something. We need a definitive answer to that.
Well, again, we just, as we just told you, this is a public right of way. It is in the public right of way. So
right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be owned by them. It's in a public right of way. It could be privately owned in a public right of way.
Right. But if it's in the public right of way, it is our argument that it is public. And if you look back at our testimony with regard to access to that street, the same would apply with regard to the infrastructure that's in the street, that it is public and it is accessible. But again, we do have a structure that satisfies the 100-year storm. This pipe is only, something of a last resort if there was some just horrific event that occurred with regard to flooding. And again, if that is a concern, we could also make it a condition of approval that we verify that that is accessible.
I don't know, Mr. Herbert, I'm kind of concerned about the 2,000-foot downstream analysis. I haven't heard any testimony about how all this affects everything 2,000 feet away.
Well, again, we did not produce all of that because we had the access to Michelle Boulevard. And again, we more than satisfy the 100-year storm requirements. But again, if that is something that you're concerned about, we can surely produce an engineering of that as a condition of approval for review by Ms. approval by Ms. Newman. Bless you.
Not sure if I am or not hearing anybody else in the board make any comments. And as Ms. Newman said, we still need to hear testimony from your planner. So I think we should hear the planner before we continue to talk about this basin, because maybe the planner doesn't convince us that it makes sense to put that basin there, and we're back to square zero again.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. It's been said over and over again in all of the previous meetings that the existing basin that is on Michelle has failed. How are we possibly adding any more water to a failed basin?
We are not adding any water to a failed basin. That basin is far back from this site. It's not part of our site. That is a separate issue that's being dealt with by the homeowners back there. Our basin handles everything with regard to our site. It really has nothing to do with that basin back there.
So absolutely no water from any of that property will ever hit that basin, you're telling us?
So that's not, no, we're not saying that. I never said that. The majority of this site does drain towards Michelle Boulevard. We've done an analysis of that and presented it to your professionals. So water does run off of this site today, goes to Michelle Boulevard and ends up in that basin. What my job to do is to make sure that we reduce the rate that that water runs off. It's required by your ordinance, it's required by DEP. We've done that. Your professionals, with knowing that there's issues out there, have suggested several conservative measures in our analysis, and we've done that. So we've prepared extensive calculations that shows a reduction in runoff off of this site to Michelle Boulevard. I'm not saying that water comes there. I'm just saying there's less water.
That's every front yard, correct?
I'm sorry?
Am I correct by saying that's all the front yards that are receiving the Michelle Boulevard runoff?
No, this site drains towards Michelle Boulevard.
So that's back rear yards and front yards, correct?
Almost the entire site, as it stands today, drains towards Michelle Boulevard. What we're doing is the driveways that we're proposing, we're putting into the ground because of the permeable pavement. The homes we're putting into the ground, and the front of the homes are going into an underground storm sewer system, a pipe system. The rear are either going to another piping system or to that infiltration basin in the back.
And we're still not sure who owns those basins, correct?
I have no reason to believe that they're within a public right of way. In almost 30 years of experience, I haven't seen privately owned storm sewer systems in a public right of way.
Okay.
Well, I've heard testimony from almost everyone on Michelle Boulevard stating the opposite.
But have they presented
I
any
would
documents?
I would suggest
If
that
I can clarify, the basin that is on Michelle Boulevard is owned and maintained by the homeowners association. That is a fact. So the stormwater basin that serves the Michelle Boulevard community is owned and maintained by the association. I think that what the board is talking about is specific to the storm sewer. The applicant is testifying to is that's a public system because it's in a public right of way in a public street. So Michelle Boulevard is in fact a public roadway. It's not a private roadway. So that's why they believe they can connect to it. I think what we've heard a lot from the Michelle Boulevard residents, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear for tonight, they absolutely own and maintain the basin which serves their community.
Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Is there a way that you can, in layman's terms, quantify the amount of stormwater runoff that you are reducing that's going to Michelle Boulevard? So we can try to hit that question up now. Is it 10%, 20%, 30%? Like what is the actual improvement that you're providing?
Yes. It's a very good question, and I'll keep it as succinct as possible. So your ordinance, as well as DEP, has 3 storms that they asked us to analyze: the 2, the 10, and the 100. So the 2-year storm statistically happens every 2 years, the 10 every 10, and the 100 every 100. The 2, the most frequent storm, we're required to reduce the runoff by 50%. We're reducing it by 40.4. The 10-year, 75%, we're reducing it 40.0. And the 100-year, 80%, and we're reducing it to 78.3. And that was presented, that's a matter of public record. We've submitted that to your professionals. It's a matter of the record.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hopkin from board members?
Yeah, if I could, and maybe I just misunderstood Mr. Hopkin. The reduction to a lower percentage means they're actually removing more water than what's required?
That's a good point. I may have misspoke, Mr. Seaman. So we are 40% of the pre-developed. We're not reducing it 40%. So you're right. So we're exceeding the standard.
Okay.
So the water flow is better than it is right now.
It's better, and it's also better than the standard.
Right. Okay. Mr.
Brian,
Chairman, any further? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Gerard.
Yeah, I had a question. Just so I'm clear, maybe this was discussed. When we're referring to the HOA, we're referring to the existing HOA on Boulevard, or were you creating a new HOA for this development?
We are creating a new HOA for this development.
So Michelle Boulevard now has an HOA, and you guys are doing your new HOA for.
Right. That is what is required by the township.
Well, I thought at one time there was discussions that you were going to try to reach out to the Michelle Boulevard HOA and try to work this out. Did that ever? I guess that never took place.
I don't recall that request. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't recall the a need.
We did meet with representatives with regard to stormwater.
I remember that, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you have like a current HOA that has 10 houses, and this is gonna whatever's on Michelle Boulevard now, and then you have this HOA. I mean, it's
well, again,
for a small area.
Yeah, as Mr. Hopkins stated, we met with the representatives of that HOA, and they did not have any interest in us joining them.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm talking from personal experience on some of these basins. I mean, we in my development, we actually had to have some type of bonding when the HOA started. And I mean, we have 3 basins here, and it was a couple $100,000. So I'm kind of concerned that 10 houses are going to kind of incur these costs here, whatever they may be.
Again, it's 8 houses, and we will, look, if the other HOA wants to talk with us about joining, we would be glad to talk to them. But as of right now, they express no interest.
Okay. It just sounds like it would be an excessive cost for an HOA of 8 houses to maintain this basin. That would be required.
And the driveways.
Yeah, I mean,
and the storm system in front of the houses.
Well, again, we have represented that the HOA will do so, and that will be a requirement, and they will understand that when they purchase a house, that they have a certain expense that they have to pay, and they have to maintain these facilities.
Part of our operation and maintenance manual does include an estimate of maintenance costs in the manual itself.
So they will go in with eyes open.
What, just out of curiosity, what would the estimate be for this, a range?
We haven't prepared it yet. We've asked that be deferred as a condition of approval because especially with this project, there's been many changes to the stormwater management. DEP has guidance on how to prepare these and ultimately your professionals will review it and have to approve it as a condition of approval, if as a condition of approval.
I definitely have a concern with that, just from my own experience for what I deal with here. For 8 houses, I mean, if I'm just doing the quick math, it's going to be 70, 80,000. I mean, I'm not a storm basin expert, but just from my own experience, so you're talking 8 houses, and if it's 80 grand, it's $10,000 a year or set aside. I mean, it's a lot of money. And then what happens if it's a problem? Then the town's responsible for it, and that's a bigger problem I have.
Yeah, again, the HOA is responsible for it. We're looking to comply with what the township is requiring us to do, and we're putting together a HOA. We'll provide deed restrictions. We'll provide a maintenance manual. We're doing everything that is required of us as part of this application.
Okay, Mr. Dorado, any other questions? Or let's, by my recommendation would be, let's hear testimony from the planner.
Yeah,
and then,
okay.
And further this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just call Mr. Alciello. Good evening, Mr. Alciello.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. Good evening.
Mr. Alciello, hi. You remain sworn, and you've heard the testimony so far with regard to the open space lot in the back. Have you not?
Yes, I have.
And you've heard testimony with regard to the basin and the basin's impact upon the open space. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what is your opinion with regard to the reading of the ordinance in that matter?
So Mr. Hopkin went through the reasoning for why the basin is on the open space lot. As the board is well aware, in your board engineer's letter, there is a variance that is called out for that. I think Mr. Hopkin made it clear that what's proposed is a better planning alternative for this subdivision, which is permitted in the zone. I think Mr. Hopkin cited some reasons. I think most importantly, even though that there will be some prever movement to accommodate this basin, he has stated for the record that he will be working with your tree expert to ensure that the amount of trees and vegetation on the site would meet her requirements. One thing that the ordinance section that is listed in the review letter, it doesn't specifically prohibit tree clearing. So in this instance, while there is a variance required for the basin going on the open lands, it doesn't specifically state that trees cannot be removed to accommodate the same. I think going back to my first testimony, I'm not sure how many hearings ago, but if the board recalls, the stormwater management situation was really made better by the fact that the houses were moved closer to the street. That's less driveway, less coverage, more woods. This is an application that's preserving more land. So I feel that given the fact that the stormwater basin is proposed in that open space lot, I think materially, relative to the lot as a whole, and not just that open space lot, I feel that the spirit and the intent of the ordinance is met relative to what's proposed. Also, as Mr. Hopkin had said in his testimony, it just made more sense for the homeowners to place the basin in the open space lot to prevent the maintenance issues on their lots. I think my testimony from my initial testimony relative to the purposes of zoning that would be advanced in the positive criteria as previously stated. Certainly, this is, in my opinion, a better planning alternative to place the basin where it's proposed in the open space lot, even though a variance is required. I feel that in doing so will not present a substantial detriment to the public good. As Mr. Hopkin had stated, there are practical reasons, as to why the basin is proposed in that lot. And of course, just to restate, because I think this is important, the applicant, will be working with your tree expert to ensure the sufficiency of trees on this lot as well. And of course, relative to whether there's a substantial negative impairment to the zone plan, the zoning ordinance, of course, even though variance is required, in this zone, for the placement of the basin on this open space lot, I believe that for all the reasons that I had previously stated, the benefits of granting this variance do outweigh the detriments. And if there are any detriments relative to the placement of the basin in this in the open space lot, I think with the mitigation that's proposed relative to vegetation throughout the site, will mitigate that and not rise this to the level of being a substantial detriment to the public good.
Thank you, Mr. Osceola.
I'd be happy to take any follow-up questions or any comments from the board or the professionals.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of things, and I think we should just hear from Christine. One, I'm not sure what criteria that was. I must have missed whether it was C1 or C2, but I didn't hear it at all. And I do just want to read to the board, this is an option under the ARE2 zone. Open land subdivision. I just want you to hear what the goal is. This option is intended to promote the retention of contiguous wooded tracts and large farm tracts, and to promote the aggregation of smaller wooded and farm parcels. It is also intended to encourage and promote flexibility, economy, and environmental soundness in subdivision layout and design. So that's what it speaks to. And certainly, I think we should hear from Christine, and I'm sure she's going to ask, but I'm not sure what criteria that testimony was presented under.
If I could answer that, Ms. Newman, real quick. For the purpose of the record, I had previously stated that my testimony from the prior hearing, I was just trying to to bring it in here by reference. But that's a great question. I think it is important, to state the criteria. I mean, I think this falls under C2 criteria. I think certainly relative to the tree plantings and the space that's on the site to accommodate this basin in this location. I believe that despite the fact that a variance is required, there's a sufficient space to accommodate this basin, which is criteria G. I also feel that despite the fact that this basin, is going on open land which is not permitted, under the ordinance, looking at the site as a whole, plus the amount of trees that are going to be provided on the site, I still believe that that criteria C is met with open space. So that's the positive criteria. And also, I would just like to reiterate that my previous testimony would apply here as well with the other criteria. And relative to the negative criteria, as I had said, it's my opinion that what's proposed, even though it is not permitted, I don't think that this rises to the level of presenting a substantial detriment to public good for the mitigation that I had stated earlier. And that's the criteria.
So, Mr. Chairman, just quickly, just to kind of say, while Mr. Osceola may have previously testified, this variance just came up. So it was never part of prior testimony. It's a new variance associated with this plan. So that's why I think I was specific in saying the criteria needed to be put forth today. The other thing we keep talking about is tree clearings allowed in the open lands. That's why I specifically read to you what the goal of an open land subdivision is. And as I noted earlier, putting the basin here results in 2 acres of additional clearing. With that, I'll go to Christine. Sorry, Christine.
That's okay. I agree with Laura. I think that this is an option that's available in the zone for subdivision. And I think that this certainly, by clearing 2 additionals of acres, in the open lands parcel. I certainly do not think that is furthering the goals of this option under the zoning ordinance. And I don't think that it is a better zoning alternative because this is an alternative in the zone already. And I'm just, concerned. I think we spoke a little bit earlier, and I think we'll probably hear more testimony tonight. But Laura brought up, this detention basin clears 2 acres of land, and then we're not sure with the additional remediation that might need to be done on the site, how much additional clearing would be done.
So Ms. Bell, if I heard you right, in layman's terms, the applicant is asking for an alternative to the alternative in our ordinance?
Yes.
And again, Mr. Chairman, the reason that we're moving the drainage basin to the back into the open space was to try to provide the best design possible for this this subdivision. Again, we do have an alternative to bring it back onto the property, the properties themselves. But again, there was a concern by by both us and the township that may be an issue with regard to those 3 properties. So again, we're just trying to present to the board what we believe is the best design possible.
Can I maybe make a clarification here? I've heard it.
Doc, I was just about to go to Dr. Hunt. Mr. Chairman, I know that there's been certain statements made about any remediation that goes here. So I have Dr. Hunt with us. He testified once before, and he can clarify some of that, if that's okay with Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you. Please.
Dr. Hunt, good evening. If you could
Good
just
evening.
identify yourself again and go forward.
Tom Hunt, Atlantic Environmental Consulting Services. I'm an environmental engineer. The question has been raised twice, I believe, just in terms of any remediation that would occur, removing any trees. The only place that we see any remediation occurring would be by the garage behind the existing residence. There's maybe a 30 by 40 foot area right now where there are no woods at all that would potentially be subject to remediation. So there would be no additional trees removed due to remediation that's being looked at the site.
And that's the area over towards the existing house, is that correct?
Correct, directly behind the house at the unattached detached garage behind the house.
Okay. Mr. Hopkin, if you could just weigh in on this as well.
So I wanted to clarify with Ms. Newman, the 2 and Ms. Bell, the 2 acres that's being cited, I believe that's an aggregate of 2 acres as the result of moving the homes back in order to comply with the buffer and the actual basin, because the basin's approximately a half an acre in size. So I believe the 2 acres, just to be fair and clear, includes the additional clearing that was required when we pushed the homes back that the board seemed to prefer.
Well,
And that was
Mr.
part of-
Hopkins, I think you started this evening by saying how that provided a 100-foot buffer by maintaining the existing vegetation. I think you testified earlier that by pushing these homes back, you were able to save a substantial portion of the vegetation along Michelle Boulevard. Did
Yes,
I
but
understand?
Yes, I did. But the driveways are longer, and the amount of clearing behind them, because of the way that the grading works out, resulted in additional clearing.
I have the numbers on that. So the first go around was 4.1 acres of clearing. When you push the driveways and the houses back to have the 100-foot, it became 4.5 acres. So a little bit of rounding, but it went from 4.5 acres up to 6.16.
But the basin itself is only a half an acre in size. It's
Yeah.
The basin itself is not causing the total 2 acres more clearing, is that correct?
Well, in order to get the basin at the back on that open land, that means those 3 lots had to have additional clearing to clear back to the open land
I understand.
property.
Yes.
So additional trees came out to get to the basin where it's proposed.
And just refresh my memory, the reason we are looking at a open space application here is that it allows them to cluster the homes. Just remind me, what is the advantage in having the extra open space? Because in my opinion, the trees are not, correct me if I'm wrong, the trees are not pretty out there. They're pretty scrawny.
So this is an open land subdivision. So essentially, under our ordinance, it's a development option. It doesn't change the yield. It enables them to have lots which range in size between 1 acres to 3 acres, whereas this is ARE2, which is a 2 acre minimum. So it allows you that deviation or that range in lot sizes, but then it requires certain things like the open space dedication. It requires the 100-foot buffer along the Shell Boulevard. That's where these requirements came into place.
Thank you for the clarification.
So at this point, if I could go, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to, I can go back to Dr. Hunt on the one question on the site remediation, or we can continue with the engineering discussion or planning, however you'd like me to proceed.
Unless the board has questions on the planning side, I think we're ready to go on to Dr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hunt, again, good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Hunt, the CME Associates letter of April 22, it talks about the findings of the phase 2 assessment. If you could just address that for the board and how we are going to remedy that.
In the phase 2 assessment, we found there was one location where there were exceedances of the NJDEP soil criteria. As I just mentioned, that was adjacent to the detached garage. Various automotive repair activity has occurred in the garage, and oils were seen on the soil adjacent to the garage and by the driveway.
And Dr. Hunt, I apologize, but that is the garage. It's attached to the existing house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it is that site on the corner of Ramtown, Greenville Road, and Kaminsky Way, or Kosminski Way.
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
So due to the concern there, we had taken a sample. There was an exceedance. In January, we took additional surface soil samples at the garage, and there were some additional exceedances that we found, and we were going to take additional samples. These samples were taken with hand augers, but the ground froze in January, so we were waiting until the weather got warmer, which is now, and we plan to finalize our delineation of those soils there. I should note the question was raised, was DEP notified? Yes, DEP was notified of the exceedance on January 27th, 2022. And we also plan to, as I said, complete the delineation there. Once the delineation is completed, we plan on excavating the soil in that area to meet the DEP criteria. Currently, as I said, it's about a 30 by 40 foot area, and it goes down in one location up to 1.5 feet. So it's not a really significant amount of soils that will be needed to be removed, and it's not near any of the wooded areas.
So in my layman farmer term, the soil will just be scooped out and transported to the correct facility for this kind of contaminated soil. Is that correct?
Yes, will be excavated and brought to a properly licensed soil facility.
And that's all under the guidance of DEP through the LSRP program. Is that correct?
Right, and I'm the LSRP for the site. It would be done under LSRP program. Once it's completed, we would do a remedial action report followed by a response action outcome, which is equivalent to the former no further action letters.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Husser, I noticed that our environmental commission had no further comments for this application. Does the testimony, you concur with the testimony?
Yeah, I saw that Tom retained as the LSRP. You know, it sounds just like a superficial spill. He's doing everything under his license and will issue an area concern RAO at the completion. So I'm fine with it.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else on the board have any other questions for this witness? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Herbert?
Mr. Chairman, I think at this point, unless anyone has any further questions of any of our witnesses, we can open it to the public and then discuss it after that. Again, Mr. Chairman, I leave it in your very good hands.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments at this point, we'll open it to the public. Eileen, could you please just remind the public of the rules and also how they can unmute themselves?
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public. Anyone wishing to ask questions or comment, please use the raise your hand feature. I will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. If you are calling in, you need to press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And I have one member already with their hand up.
Hi.
Mayor, thank you for joining us. Would you please state your name, your address?
Yep, it's Joe Mauer, 31 Michelle Boulevard.
Mr. Mayor, were you previously sworn in a couple hearings ago, or shall I swear you in?
I was.
You acknowledge you remain under oath, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
So just want to address a few further things. I did hear that the applicant wants to tap into the stormwater system, and they said that it was in the right of way. I know a member on the planning board said that it was probably, they were referring to it being on the right of the way of the road. That is correct. However, that stormwater management system does drain into our basin that we own. So if they were to tap into that, it is going to go into our basin. It is in the right of the way of the street, but it does not make it a public drainage system because it is going into a privately owned system. So it actually, in fact, makes it even more of an issue with drainage because now you're directly tapping into our drainage. Another concern was I heard about the permeable driveways. There has to be a deed restriction as far as it being seal coated. The HOA that they're going to also start has to maintain that they have to use a certain pavement and whatnot. My question really is who's policing that? Because with our HOA, it's the homeowners that are on the HOA board. We're elected. So if all 8 people on the HOA board, you have say 3 out of the 8 are on the HOA board, they all could agree just basically to keep their mouth shut and seal that driveway. I mean, is it going to be our responsibility on Michelle Boulevard to police them? And if that's the case, I mean, it's becoming like almost like a harassment issue because it's not even it's not even part of our HOA. So, yeah, it's going to be derestricted, but who's to say they're just going to, all agree to keep their mouth shut and steal their driveways? And now we have more runoff onto Michelle. And this is really our problem. It's our drainage. We have the basin currently. It's in a failed state. It's supposed to be dry. It has been wet ever since it might have been dry maybe 4 days out of the last 7 years it's been here. And, if we have 8 more houses going in, I don't know. Who's to say it's even going to be able to who's to say it's going to not collapse a year later? And then who's on the hook for that cost? The 23 homeowners on Michelle Boulevard. We all own that. We all maintain that financially. If that wall collapsed because you have an extra house over there, who's on the hook for that? Hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair that. It's not going to be them. And if we absorb them into our HOA, now we're all collectively responsible for repairing that when it's really at fault of the 8 homes over there. So we really have no interest of absorbing them into our HOA because we don't want to share the cost of a failed basin caused by this extra runoff over there. And I've heard also the engineer state that currently the land runs off onto Michelle. I don't know if he's ever been out physically on the site. I live here. I pass by it multiple times a day. You might have a 6-inch grade there. We're talking it's flat. There's no hill. There's no runoff going on over there. It's permeating right into the ground. So maybe on surveying reports there's a grade, but we're talking a foot, maybe over a course of 50 feet here of a grade. So there's really no runoff going on. So our main concern really is who's going to foot the bill if our basin fails, because we own it. We have 23 houses in an HOA. So as another member said, you know, when you have a small amount of members in an HOA, the costs are, you know, exponential. And, you know, we have $100,000 repair bill over here. You split that over a course of 23 homes. That's ridiculous that we're gonna have to pay that. So I really hope the planning board takes into consideration those concerns, because it is not a public basin. The township does not maintain it or own it. So that's really our biggest concern as of right now. Thank you.
That concludes your testimony, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else from the town, the audience?
Yes, hold on one second. Good.
Hi,
Can you state your name and address, please?
Sarah Quinones, 43 Michelle Boulevard, Howell.
So can you please spell your name for us?
Quinones.
And your first name, ma'am?
Sarah,
DARA?
Sarah.
Sarah.
And I'm sorry, your address again?
43 Michelle.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Quinones, do you swear or affirm that any testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
Yes, please.
I just had a couple points of clarification. I thought that I heard, I don't know if it was the attorney for the applicant or who was speaking, but that they thought that moving basin to the open space lot as opposed to closer to the backyards of the proposed dwellings would mitigate an issue on the maintenance issues on the lots for those three houses. Is that accurate? If so, aren't we saying that the association is supposed to be taking care of that? Why would it be an issue for those three homeowners or two homeowners whose lots the basin encroached on? I was also curious if there are other developments or applications that the applicant has in that are either developed, pending, variance. I don't know, if anybody's familiar, but there are quite a few developments that have been started, namely the one across the street that I think was referenced in the beginning of the call as well, that was started, approved a couple of years ago, and it remains without any development on it. So the actual site work was done, but there were no property improvements or dwellings built. So curious if there are any other, if this current applicant has any other pending applications, either for variances or permitted properties in the area that that they are also working on, because we certainly don't want to have a development started like we have across the street and then sits idle, for months or years, creating, an issue for us on Michelle Boulevard. I also heard you say something about, these proposed 8 homes would have their frontage, so they would drive through Michelle Boulevard to access their driveways. Is that accurate? If it is, then they are using our street, right? So then does that tie into the maintenance and repairs that we are, expected to uphold as homeowners for our association? So definitely some concerns on my end. I also thought it was interesting, and Joe also pointed this out, but whoever made the comment about how the basin had stood to the 200-year storm? I mean, ours, I'm sure, was tested and approved at the time as well. And as Joe mentioned, it fails repeatedly. So that's also a concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the testimony.
Absolutely.
Anybody else from the public?
Yes. Mr. Vanga, go ahead. Your name and address, please. Mr. Vanga, can you hear us?
No, we can just hear your music.
First time I've had an application to a beat, Mr. Chairman.
It's like you're putting a mix together. You got us on your background. See,
I'm going to bring someone in while he works on that.
Vanga, you may want to close out and then get back in, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, was that any better?
Oh, there you go.
Can you turn that off, please?
Yeah.
If you need to go to somebody else, that's fine. I'm ready.
No, we're fine.
Go ahead.
Now.
Sorry, but my kids were pushing buttons over there, so.
Mr. Grimaldi, hold on, because we have Mr. Vanga first.
I assure you, I am not a cat.
All right. Now, Mr. Vanga, I know you may have testified earlier. Would you like to be sworn, or would you like to acknowledge you remain under oath from a prior appearance?
No, I'll acknowledge that I remain under oath.
Okay. And what is your address, sir?
46 Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Is it possible to have the visual aid of the site plan up while I ask questions?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Eileen, would you like to bring that up? Or
Walter brought it up before, so Walter, can you bring that up, please?
And just a point of clarity for my education, am I just making a statement, or am I allowed to ask questions and then wait for responses?
you are sworn under oath, so our attorney will give you what you can and can't do. Please.
Cool.
Well, Vanga, I mean, this is public comments and questions, so you can ask questions, and the applicant will likely respond to them after you're done. So please present all your questions and commentary, and then the applicant will likely respond to them.
Okay. I'll do them in order. I'll say I stopped my question, then we'll move on to the next one just to make sure we have it for the record. I guess this is first a general question. We've heard a lot about the water in the basin, so I'm going to move past that. I think other residents in the neighborhood are already kind of covering that. Is it possible for the applicant to clarify what is happening with the home in the untouched portion? Is the expectation that that home and I believe secondary structure garage are going to remain as is, or are they going to request permits to do improvements on that lot and, you know, put a different house there or do something different with the lot? I'm just curious. It's my understanding that the garage is going to go, or the chicken coop, I don't know exactly what it is going to be demolished. I just wanted a clarification on that. Second, it's kind of hard to tell from the visual here, but if I understand correctly, the square blocks next to each of the driveways, is that intended to be trees and remain trees, the same ones that are in the woods there now, or are they going to pull those out and replace them? That was my second question. Third, in case somebody doesn't cover it, we would request that official analysis to ensure that the water system in front of our neighborhood is in fact the property of whoever. It sounded like, and I appreciate his expertise, the engineer said that in his 30 years, he's never seen it. To me, that's not enough. I just want to make sure that we have done that. And if it's something that someone from our community needs to formally request, obviously just let us know and we'll fill out paperwork or whatever we need to do to start that process. And number four, probably most importantly to me, and I'm just going to say something first. It's obvious that we're not off to a great start with our new neighbors. This is not necessarily going well, as you can tell by the public participation from the folks inside the Woodmere community. So my next request is, assuming we cannot, stop this from happening, because honestly, that's our intent. We're not interested, particularly the homeowners in the front of the development, in having two houses for everyone across the street. I'm speaking for them. I actually don't live in that section of the neighborhood, but I can understand. And I would hope that folks on the board understand that as well. That I think that's driving a lot of the questions here. So having said that, we would request that if the board does decide to approve this, that with regard to the outflow structure, which I think is the hotly debated topic,
can we make it a condition of approval that if the water overtops the basin in the 100-year storm for their new basin, that it is directed at the township's property where the middle school sits? There's a secondary basin over there. There's also probably sewer. I'm assuming there's a whole, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I'm assuming there's a whole system over there to deal with water. If the township is comfortable with this arrangement, then we would request that they would be comfortable accepting the 100-year storm rainfall into their public buildings as opposed to our private ones. They're probably better equipped to recovering from the damages. I think that's it.
Thank you. Counselor?
Do you want me to answer the questions now, Mr. Chairman, or is that it for public, or how would you like me to proceed?
No, let's answer Mr. Vanga's questions independently, please.
Okay. With regard to what is happening at the remaining home, as Mr. Hopkin, I believe, testified before, the applicant is looking to clean up the home, redevelop it a bit. You know, the home would remain, but it would, the site would be cleaned up and made to look much more architecturally appealing. As you know, some of the out structures will be removed, as is shown on the exhibit that's before us. The same thing will happen with the other building that will remain. It'll be cleaned up, new siding, and made to look more visually appealing. With regard to the block that's in front of each house of trees.
Sir, I'm sorry. Just one quick question. I'm not sure how it works. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, please go ahead.
Considering the size of the property I'm looking at there, and having been there, I live here. Why the decision to utilize Michelle Boulevard as opposed to split the difference between the properties and enter those properties from Ramtown Greenville Road? I just struggle to understand that after all of this, what is the reason for that not being the choice here?
We looked at all our various options of design for the site, and this was the design that worked the best. And Mr. Hopkin, if you could just elaborate on that a little bit further.
It just creates the closed system that we're all talking about here, right?
Sure.
So, Mr. Vang, I assume that you're talking about basically running a road up the middle of the property and having homes on either side. I mean, obviously that would create an additional amount of impervious area. It would create additional infrastructure that the township would be required to maintain. And the lots from a planning perspective would have frontage on both sides. We kind of have that now, but we've been able to mitigate it with the open space lot. So these lots only have frontage on Michelle Boulevard. If we went up the middle, the homes would have frontage on both the new road. On one side, they'd be backed up by Kosminski Way, and on the other side, they'd back up to Michelle.
Yeah, I guess I didn't expect much of a different answer. It's just, you know, looking at it, it seems like a solution. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I believe you wanted to ensure that you didn't want to have it. I'm sorry, going to the basin, you were worried about the pipe leading out to the stormwater, the Michelle Boulevard stormwater pipe. With regard to that, as we said, if for some reason that pipe cannot be located there, we've already stated that if there is more than a 100-year storm, we can work on a sheet flow going out towards the school. Again, we're trying to work with the township and as professionals. This is what they believe was the best solution, but we're willing to do whatever the board and the township wish for us to do with regard to the basin.
Yeah, I'm just the kind of person who's kind of looking for a negotiated solution all the time.
Sure, we believe me, we want to work with you on this in any way we can to make it the best development possible with the least impact upon on your property.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like I'm still of the opinion that really this we're not a big fan, but I would ask the board to consider, or the engineers to consider, that at the very least, should anything else move forward on this, that the township take on the risk of the 100-year overtopping as opposed to private homes? Because we've had some bad experiences, sir, as you can tell by our commentary.
Sure. And again, I think as Mr. Hopkins testified, this basin will handle the 100-year storm. We are engineering the heck out of this property to make sure that water will not be an issue for the surrounding neighborhood as much as possible. The pipe is only there if you go above the 100-year storm.
Yeah, no, I understand. We've just had some bad experiences in this area.
I understand it completely. I've been out in your area. I have seen your drainage basin, so I understand where you're coming from.
Sure. And the last question I had was the one about the trees. So you're suggesting that the trees in the square blocks in front of each of those homes is the current vegetation that lives there today?
Mr. Hopkins, if you could address the block of trees.
Mr. Venga, is this what you're referring to when I'm tracing here? Yes, those are trees to remain, yes.
Hell of a look, guys. All right, thank you.
Well, Mr. Venga, as you recall, we had the homes closer to the street, and the homeowners were concerned about the homes being close to the street. So in order to address those issues, we are now moving it back so that the trees remain and that the houses are not as apparent to the neighborhood.
I know you've adhered, you've accommodated our feedback, that's for sure. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. This is Joe Cristiano. I can hear and I can see everything, but my video went out, so you're not seeing me. Just wanted to make sure that's okay.
Steve, is that okay?
It is okay. I mean, ideally, we'd love to see you, Joe, but as long as you can see the screen and it's not impacting your ability to look at all the evidence and participate, then it's okay.
I see everything.
Perfect.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right, we have Robert Grimaldi.
okay. Mr. Grimaldi?
I'm looking for Mr. Grimaldi. There, hi. Mr. Grimaldi, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear from that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
And what is your address, sir?
My address is 20 Michelle Boulevard.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll start out by saying, in the interest of transparency, my home is located adjacent to the existing basin on Michelle Boulevard. So I certainly have a vested interest in these discussions, and I want to thank Mr. Chairman and the rest of the board for taking this matter seriously and into consideration. So what I wanted to discuss, as some of my neighbors have discussed, is once again the proposed water basin, and particularly the runoff pipe. My concern there is that in the event of a 100-year storm, or let's call it a 200-year storm, something greater than a 100-year storm, where that pipe needs to be utilized and the runoff go into the existing storm system. What was not mentioned by Mr. Hopkins or Mr. Herbert is that probably our existing storm system, our existing basin, will probably be under the same stresses, if not greater, and therefore certainly could not take on any additional load in that sort of situation. So I would just like for everybody to take that into account. Furthermore, I've heard earlier about the right-of-way, and I'm not a civics engineer, but I am a graduate. And from what I recall from right-of-way is usually invoked when it's for the greater community. The classic example that we were taught was if a highway needs to go through, right-of-way could be invoked for that. In this case, and I do understand that the street might be considered public, but I don't see why right-of-way would be invoked to run a pipe to our sewer system when there would be clearly other solutions, if maybe not the best that was determined by the applicant, but that there would be other solutions. So I would just like for that to be taken into consideration. And also, I don't know what scenarios are used to predict the 100-year storm. For all I know, these could be scenarios that were drafted many, many years ago and perhaps don't reflect the current conditions. We all know that we've had several so-called 100-year storms in recent times, and they seem to be occurring more and more frequently. So I don't know what kind of standards are being used, and if the standards are outdated, I think that also needs to be taken into consideration. And basically that's all I have to say, and just curious about any comment or feedback about what I said. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, any response?
Again, we understand the homeowners' issue with their own basin. Again, just to emphasize, the drainage basin, as Mr. Hopkins testified, is there to handle the 100-year storm. An argument was made that, yes, we've had a couple 100-year storms, and there was a concern about the water going into that basin. Again, we're doing everything that we can to ameliorate stormwater out there. This is something the township has requested for us to do. We can look at alternatives if the board wants us to do that. It's up to the board. If the board wants the pipe, we can do the pipe. If the board would rather that we do a drainage basin where the flow goes out I guess it's the west side of the property, that's something we can do as well. It's up to the board how you want to proceed.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If I may rebut, with regard to the pipe, I understand once again that that has been designed according to 100-year storms due to a 100-year storm, but on the plan is that pipe, and obviously your engineer has developed some sort of plan should there be a storm that's greater and your basin cannot handle it. But the solution is to run the pipe and put the additional water into our basin, which there's been testimony by a board member, there's been testimony by the public that our current basin has some issues. And knowing that, how could that be a feasible solution? I understand the pipe would be there to protect our new neighbors, and I understand that. However, I don't think that the risk should be placed on the current community that if there is such a storm and the basin cannot handle it, that the overflow is put onto our basin, which is already known to have some issues. I think knowing that there is that issue, I think that that should have been scrapped from the beginning. You don't want to put the burden on your neighbors when your neighbor's already having a problem. And furthermore, if I had some sort of issue with my home, my bathtub overflows or something like that, I just can't run a pipe and stick it on my neighbor's property to alleviate the overflow. So once again, I just asked the board to please take my comments into consideration. Thank you.
And again, the applicant completely understands the concerns of the neighbor. We want to do what is best for the neighborhood. We leave it again up to the board. If you want us to run the pipe, we can do that. Or we can work with Ms. Newman on the basin having the, as Mr. Hopkins talked about before, the sheet flow towards the open field near the school.
Thank you. That's all I have to say this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grimaldi. Helene, anybody else?
Yes, I have April and Todd Harrington.
I think I see Todd Harrington. Is April also there? We can't hear you, Mr. Harrington.
Thank you. Yeah,
Oh.
we're hiding out from the kids. We've got some a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so we're trying to be quiet here in the bed.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Oh, we
Can't hear me?
You're too
Well,
low.
you have to speak up a little bit.
Okay, let me try to see if I can make my volume a little bit louder. Just give me 1 second to do that.
Increase the volume of your mic, please.
Yeah, anybody know how to get to that? Let's see, audio settings. Sorry. Okay. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Much better. Mr.
Better.
Harrington, what is your address?
My address is 2 Michelle Boulevard.
Okay, are you gonna be asking questions or providing some commentary tonight?
I'd like to do both.
Okay, so I'll swear you in then.
Okay.
Mr. Harrington, do you swear from that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right, excellent. Is it possible for the engineer to pull up the drawing of the proposed development? I want to make sure everybody sees where our house is on the development. I know that Joe Maurer was mentioning it and maybe hoping that somebody would comment. So maybe you could, the lot 26.03. Yep, that's the lot that we're in. Okay, so right now we're pretty lucky. We have a neighbor on one side, 26.04, a neighbor on the other side, 26.01, and that's it. So the proposed and our driveway is on the left side of our lot. So where the 26.04 and 26.03 meet, our driveway runs, perpendicular to the street. So at the end of our driveway, the proposed, I guess, drawing shows 2 driveways plus another third one, all within, I guess, pretty close to our property line, if not our property line. So, I mean, I think the disadvantage that we didn't talk about, or I think it was one of the things they were seeking relief on, was the traffic aspect. I wanted to bring that up. I mean, we have basically none now, and then we'd have 3 driveways. People drive pretty fast sometimes on Michelle Boulevard, not necessarily the neighbors, but the Uber people or grocery delivery people, and this is a very straight road until it hits the roundabout. So having even more, hopefully the people that would move if this got approved would have kids and all of that. Having even more traffic and more driveways and all of that, it's a negative. So I wanted to mention that. The next thing I wanted to mention was this permeable pavement. I think that this is a perfect example, in Mr. Herbert's own words, of engineering the heck out of these properties and the drainage. I know that they're doing everything that they can to say, this is a great site to build on. And it seems like every single aspect that is being discussed is saying, no, this is not a great site. We can't keep the amount of trees. We have nowhere to put the water. There's going to be additional traffic. The characteristic of the zone, I think that was mentioned by Laura, I think it was, the statement about the ARE2 zone having a 1 acre to 2 acre lot, and the goal was to have it well designed so that it maintained the character of that. I don't know if the word farmland was used, but that was the goal. And it seems like the engineering the heck out of this property is kind of defeating that goal or that spirit of this zone. So perhaps maybe a different type of subdivisioning zoning would be more appropriate if we're going to try to put this number of dividable lots. I mean, as the applicant, I would think, hey, why wouldn't you put maybe 3 lots, 2 lots, 4 lots, something like that, instead of trying to put 8 into an area where there's currently, 3.5? So I guess that's a piece of commentary. The other thing that someone mentioned was this idea of deed restriction as a method of enforcing this permeable pavement. I don't think that's a very effective method. So I would ask the board, if this was approved, I don't know how it would be, but if it was approved, there's got to be a more effective way. And I think one of the neighbors talked about enforcement of that. I mean, if the people on the HOA board are the ones that make the rules, I guess there would have to be some way that they would be prevented from rewriting the HOA rules about permeable pavement, because if they're the ones that vote, couldn't they just vote to change that? And if you're an owner and you find out to maintain your driveway it's cracking, it's going to cost you $2,000 or $3,000 to have it redone, or $4,000, and you thought it was going to be a $200 seal coat, even if you were told that or it was in the HOA docs, that's a problem. The other thing that I thought that was interesting was this idea of if there's a problem. So like if we start having a drainage problem and now the township goes to the new HOA, and they have funds that are set aside and maybe they're paying $1,000 a month HOA fee. Maybe that's the solution. Even in that case, what if that HOA reserve fund is short? You know, what is the outcome? You know, how do we get over that? Okay, it's $100,000 repair. There's 50,000 in their HOA. You know, is there a special assessment? Does the town have the ability to fine that HOA for not properly managing their budget? That was another question. And then I had another question. This is maybe a legal question, but I guess my question would be: is the board satisfied that this applicant has legal access to Michelle Boulevard, and who has the onus or who has the legal requirement to prove that they have access? Is it the applicant has to prove that they have access and they have to provide an attorney or some sort of legal documentation? Is it the board that has to have their attorney make the analysis of whether they have the legal access? What is who has the onus to do that? And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about how there was a drawing that was submitted, but it didn't have the proper notice. So it couldn't be used for this meeting. But then I saw that there was this 42822 rendering that's in the upper left-hand corner. And I noticed that we had gone to that a couple of times, but I was wondering, was that the one that we're not permitted to use? And I know that this was recorded, so maybe that answers itself. But I thought that might be something that was worth mentioning. Yes. Oh, and the last thing was the tree clearing. And I think that what Ed was alluding to, and I think that the chairman as well was saying, is that the trees that are here in this area currently, they definitely support the woodland life. There's tons of deer and other animals that are there now, and that's excellent. But as far as desirability for a new homeowner, having these type of pine trees that are not planted in a meaningful way, they're just, you know, naturally grown. I don't know that that's going to match the neighborhood from across the street, you know, like where you've got these very manicured lawns on these very large, wide lots. So I don't know that that's, I don't want to say the best plan, but I mean, I understand the intention, but I don't know, like it's practicality versus, I don't know. I understand the goal, but I don't know that this is the right way to achieve that goal. And then I guess the last thing that I thought was really interesting, the other neighbor mentioned, you know, clearing the land, preparing these lots to be ready to be built. That's definitely important. And then building the properties on the lot, that's, I would say, even more important, especially if you're the neighbor that's across the street that's staring at a vacant lot, or three, or I'd say, and for my lot, I could see 4 in this case. We don't, you know, obviously want that. And it seems like that's been happening in this section of Howell. And I'm personally in the mortgage business, that's my profession. And I'm watching interest rates rise. I'm watching demand cool. I'm watching, you know, hopefully not another 2008. But if something like that were to happen where now, you know, houses can't be sold at these astronomical prices, there's much less of an incentive for the builder to build now, and they've got an approved plan they could just postpone. And I would ask the board, is there some sort of timeline that they would have to complete the build, or could these properties sit, you know, essentially vacant with, you know, developed land for an infinite amount of time before they would be built? So yeah, those are, I guess, some of my questions and my comments, and thank you guys for allowing me to participate.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your questions. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the driveway entrances, it is the design of the site. I think there are 2 across from your property. Walter, if you could just leave the document up. Sorry about that. Thank you. And with regard to the driveways, again, you know, they're standard driveways that would naturally be across the street from you. If you go further into the development, there are driveways on each side of the development. So I don't know what more we can do with regard to that. With regard to the permeable pavement, again, that'll be deed restricted. It won't, the HOA cannot vote to remove that. It'll be deed restricted. Each homeowner will be required to abide by it. And if they don't abide by it, they'll be violating the deed restriction, and it can be enforced. With regard to too many lots on the site, I don't think that, you know, eliminating 1 or 2 lots at this point would really alleviate the concerns. I'm getting the feeling that, look, everyone would like to see the area remain open, but this area has been zoned by the township to be developed with a residential development. With regard to the trees, they will again be deed restricted to remain in place. They cannot be removed by the owners in the front there. So, again, that area will be protected. And again, we're trying to work with the neighborhood and with the board and the township to make sure that this is something that is as acceptable as possible. And that's why we move the homes back, to be able to leave those trees in the front as a buffer. Legal access to Michelle Boulevard, again, that was an issue early on in this application. We presented testimony and documentation as to why we have access. If we don't have access, I'll tell you, if we don't have access legally and we build these homes, we've got a real problem. So again, we've already looked into that, and we've made sure that we do have access. Trying to go through all of your other questions. With regard to if the market goes soft and the land is left just cleared, again, this is not a developer that proceeds in that way. That development that's across the street is another developer. That's not something that this developer does. I mean, he has invested a lot of money already into this application. If he does not bring these homes onto market within a certain amount of time, that money will be lost. So again, there is incentive for him to build. And as you know, in the current housing market, there is a real need for these types of homes and a real demand for them. But again, that's not a standard for the board to review as part of the application. It's just whether we comply with the local zoning ordinances. I think I answered all your questions. If I have missed anything, please let me know.
Yeah, I guess my question, maybe it should be directed to the chairman or maybe some of the other members of the board. I mean, is it when it comes to the access to Michelle Boulevard, is it the case that the applicant needs to prove they have access, or is it the case that the board reviews it and they have an attorney that determines that access is permitted? Or what is who has the burden of proof there? And has that been provided? Is the board in agreement that Michelle Boulevard is accessible for this applicant?
Perhaps I can, Chairman, perhaps I can address that. Mr. Harrington, what the applicant, this issue was raised, I don't recall which hearing it was, but one of the homeowners on Michelle Boulevard suggested that when the developer of the Michelle Boulevard properties retained for the HOA a certain strip of land on the far side of Michelle Boulevard. And in response to that, the applicant provided some title work, some surveys, and the engineer has testified that their properties, the applicant's property, physically touches the Michelle Boulevard right-of-way, that there is no strip, because that was the suggestion that the developer many years ago said nothing would ever be built on the applicant's property.
Right,
or
part of why people bought here.
They would never connect to Michelle Boulevard because of this strip. But unless your HOA or your title people can come up with some map or deed or something to suggest that the applicant's property does not physically touch Michelle Boulevard, then all the planning board has before it now is the applicant's proofs that they do have access.
Okay, that answers that question. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Walter, can you stop sharing so I can see the public, please?
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have Amy.
Hi, Amy, it's your turn. Can you let us know your name and your address? And if you're going to provide comments, we'll swear you in.
Yes, I'm actually going to have my husband do it, Jason Ash.
And how do you spell Ash?
A-S-C-H.
Very good. And what is your address, Mr. Ash?
32 Michelle Boulevard.
Okay. Mr. Ash, are you going to be providing a testimony this evening?
Yes.
So let's swear you in. So raise your right hand, sir. Mr. Ash, do you swear or affirm that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you. So, while I feel that the larger buffer and the trees remaining on Michelle Boulevard are visually appealing, and I know myself, as all the other neighbors, appreciate the effort, I'm concerned about the effect of those larger driveways and the trees on the permeable pavement. So permeable pavement only works when it's kept at optimal conditions. Now, going back to Joe Mauer's comments, who is going to enforce that this pavement that Mr. Hopkins is claiming with his percentages and his numbers, these are all optimal numbers provided by manufacturers. Who's going to maintain this product in an optimal condition? We call it a wind tunnel back here, and debris and wind blows like crazy. And the addition of the trees along Michelle Boulevard and all of the debris is going to clog the permeable pavers and or pavement, concrete, asphalt, pavers, whatever they choose to use. When this concrete or pavement gets clogged, it exhibits great reductions in its permeability. It's well documented online. And again, Mr. Hopkins' numbers are optimal. This product is not going to remain optimal. And it's well known, we've all said it, huge problems with our basin. Our basin was produced, manufactured to endure a 100-year storm, just like all the products that Mr. Hopkins is saying, but it does not. It failed. When his products fail, who's going to be responsible? Who's going to maintain these products? Because when they fail, and they will fail because they will get clogged from debris, and all that extra water is not going to go into his basin because these products do not drain to his basin. They're going to come down into our roadway. So I would urge you to find documentation and have them provide a backup plan for these longer driveways now. Because while visually appealing, they're going to fail and are going to cause our roadway a huge problem. Number one. Number two, I would like to go back to Ed Vanga's comments about why it is better to build these homes on Michelle Boulevard and take up an entire road when you can easily do a small road off Ramtown Greenville Road, half the size of ours, and put 4 houses on each side. It's less area, and all that area can drain into their basin. We have no concerns about our basin. We have no effects on our systems that we maintain, that we pay for. They would be self-contained. I don't understand why they can't build a shorter road, 4 on each side, and let all that go into their same basin. And lastly, I would just like to emphasize again, like Todd Harrington said, it's been well known that you guys are engineering the heck out of this project. What happens when the engineering does not perform the way it's supposed to? Because our engineering does not. So you cannot guarantee us that your engineering is going to perform the way it's supposed to. We have examples where ours doesn't when we were told it was going to. So what ramifications, what backup, what guarantees do we have as an existing development that your project is not going to affect us? I don't think that's been provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think my term engineering the heck out of the project is being taken not in the way I meant it. So I apologize for that. What I was meant to say was that we're trying to use the best engineering possible for this type of project. We're trying to use the most superior way of of designing this project. That's what I meant by that. Not that we're doing something that's unusual or something that is uncalled for. With regard to the permeable pavement, again, there will be a maintenance. There will be maintenance documents be part of the deed requirement. If the maintenance is not followed up on and the driveway is not maintained, they will be in violation. They can be cited, and they will be in violation of their deed notice as well. So again, it is enforceable. If the other neighbors see that the driveways are not being properly maintained, they can report it to the township, as well as to the HOA itself. So again, permeable pavement is used all over New Jersey. It's used successfully. It is effective at what it does. It's why it is used.
It's effective. I'm sorry, sir. It's effective when it performs at optimal performance. I guarantee you, a year or two in, it will not perform at optimal performance here, and you cannot guarantee us that. And you cannot guarantee us that it'll be maintained. And people fall through on their promises, and you can say there's a deed and you can say we can complain to the town, but this is a lengthy and sometimes unsuccessful process. And the fact that you have extended the amount of permeable pavement is of great concern to me, because when it does fail, and I promise you, sir, it will fail, it will not perform at 100%, because it will not be maintained at 100%, because it's very difficult. And there's numerous articles online about this. It's going to fall onto us. Why does it fall onto us to come to the township? Why does it fall on us to complain about it? Why does it fall on us to take on any extra? Thank you.
Am I going to be cut off again? Okay, I just want to make sure, because I was trying to continue on with my response and you cut me right off. So I just want to make sure. I'm sorry.
I said, I apologize. I didn't realize.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this is, you know, these are technical issues. I'm just trying to go through them for you. Walter, the issue of permeable pavement, if you could just explain how it works and how it is maintained, and about the optimal performance issue that the gentleman is talking about.
So permeable pavement is designed so that there are gaps that allow water to go into the ground. I'm sure at 9:25 at night, the board doesn't want an exhaustive explanation about it, but there is the possibility of it being clogged, but it has to be maintained. And basically it's almost like a vacuum that removes any accumulated debris. We do take into account degradation, and there is a factor of safety built into it with regard to the underlying soil. So we do have a factor of safety. DEP mandates this, that we use 1/2 of the permeability of the soil rather than what we test in place. So that's how it works. There are some precautions that are built into it, and there are no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees in life, but this has been engineered. There have been many reviews by your professionals. It's not like this was just a one and done application. And it's not just reviewed by your professionals. Monmouth County reviews it. The Soil Erosion District reviews it. There's various other agencies that review it besides your professionals.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkin. With regard to the design of the houses being on Michelle Boulevard, I think we went through that before as to why we are designing the site in the way we are designing. I mean, if Mr. Chairman, if you want me to go through that again, I can, but I think we've already responded to that.
That's fine.
Okay. And I believe I'm answering Mr. Ash's questions at this point. If I missed anything, please let me know. I think that's it.
Did we lose Mr. Ash? Ellen?
We may have.
No, sorry, I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
That conclude your questions.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eileen, how many other people do we have in the audience?
Right now, there's 3 with their hands up.
Okay, we got to take a 5-minute break. It's 2.5 hours. I think
Mr. Chairman.
everybody needs a potty break.
Thank you. Thank
At
you.
this time, the board is going to take a brief recess. They'll be back at 9:35. At this time, the planning board will reconvene.
Yes, please. And next individual from the public, please.
I believe that was Amy.
We're good, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, we have Lisa Ransom. Oh, I'm sorry. We had John Motto first.
Okay.
John, go ahead. You're muted.
No, thank you.
Mr. Motto, what is your street address, sir?
It's 36 Michelle Boulevard.
Okay, Mr. Motto, are you going to be providing testimony this evening or just asking questions?
Yes. I will provide testimony. Both.
Okay, let's swear you in. Please raise your right hand, sir. Mr. Motto, do you swear from that any testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed, sir.
So in the last testimony from the engineer, did I hear him correctly that he said that the permeable surfaces need to be vacuumed? If that's the case, you know, how often does that get done? And it sounds like something that needs to be done by a qualified contractor. Who bears the cost of that? Is that something the association is going to take on and hire, like lawn maintenance, or is that the homeowner's responsibility? And then the other thing, the other question I had was around, you know, we know that the Michelle Boulevard basin failed. Do we know the root cause of that, and have those lessons learned been incorporated into this basin to ensure that the new basin won't fail as well? And then lastly, you know, honestly speaking, I know there was testimony that there's a shortage of homes and homes like these are in demand, but if I were looking for a home, I wouldn't want a house that's got a driveway that needs to be vacuumed, some ugly trees in the front that I can't touch, and all these restrictions in place. I mean, honestly, are they going to be able to sell these things, or are they going to clear all the land, make a mess of things, and then abandon it? So those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Motto.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the permeable pavement, again, we will be providing, as we are required to, a maintenance guideline and schedule. It will require the homeowners to comply with that. And part of that maintenance is, you know, are certain treatments for it. I mean, if you like for me to have Mr. Hopkins go through the specifics of the maintenance, I can, but I don't. You know, I think that that's really something for, you know, it's not something for the board to go over the specifics of the maintenance.
I think, Mr. Herbert, if I could just help there for the.
Sure.
Could you just reiterate that what is the HOA's responsibility in regards to that maintenance, and just keep it in those general terms, please?
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Yes, again, the HOA as well as the homeowners, you know, are under deed restrictions to make sure it is maintained. The HOA will make sure that the driveways are maintained, as well as the homeowners, as will be required by the deed restriction, which is, you know, a lawful document.
Thank you.
With regard to the failure of the Michelle Boulevard Basin, you know, again, that is something that is an issue for the neighborhood. We sympathize and we understand, you know, the concern with it. That is a basin that is older than the basin we are proposing. The basin we are proposing is being engineered through Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins has a successful practice. He's got a good track record with regard to basins. And again, Ms. Newman is one of the best municipal engineers out there. She will also work with Mr. Hopkins to make sure it is that the basin works. And again, he's given testimony as to why the basin will work, how it will work, and so forth. That's part of the record. With regard to whether the homes are desirable and marketable, that's really not an issue for the planning board to dive into. But again, this is a successful builder who, if he doesn't go ahead and if he doesn't build desirable homes, can't sell them and would lose a lot of money. So he would make sure that, they are homes that are desirable and are marketable.
Thank you.
May I reply?
Absolutely.
With all due respect, our basin was also designed by a professional, was also approved by the planning board, and it failed from day one. And it's a headache for all of us. It's full of water now. It's a mosquito nightmare. And it cannot handle another basin connected to it that would also fail. So unless you can guarantee that whatever was done wrong to the Michelle Boulevard Basin won't be done to that basin, do we even know what was done wrong to the Michelle Boulevard? Because there's been a million people out here trying to figure it out. I don't see how we can make that statement.
My understanding from others who have made statements with regard to the basin, again, we don't have access to the basin. That's not something that we can analyze. It's not our basin. But my understanding from some of the other members of the public, when we met with the public and some statements have been made here, is that there may have been some defective ways in the way the basin was made, and that's why it's not working correctly. Again, I don't know that. That's just the statements that are being made. I can assure you that our basin will be engineered to every requirement Ms. Newman places upon that. And I've known Ms. Newman for a long time, and she is very good about making sure these basins work.
No, and I don't want to ditch Miss Newman, but I think you were probably involved in ours as well. So, it's not, I'm an engineer too, mistakes happen, but this is, there's guarantees, there's no guarantees. And I think a couple of the other homeowners stated it before. What happens when it fails and we're the ones left hanging the bag? Will the township take financial responsibility for a failure? Because we're the ones holding the bag right now on ours. So, I think these are all legitimate concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Donato. Appreciate it. Eileen?
Have Lisa Ransom.
Mr. Ransom, please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. And what is your address, Ms. Ransom?
Sure, it's 34 Michelle Boulevard.
Okay. Ms. Ransom, do you anticipate providing testimony before the board or just asking questions?
Let's swear me in just in case.
Right. Please raise your right hand.
Sure.
Ms. Ransom, do you swear affirm that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Of course, I have the same concerns that everyone else on our street has. And just to going back to if there are any new planning board members on the call, our street has 23 homes. Our lots go up to 3+ acres on some of the sites. Where these homes want to be built, as Todd and April stated, that there are 4 homes in Woodmere on that across the street from the new development that is being proposed, and they're trying to put 8 homes there. The aesthetic of the street is not going to look the same. We had a separate call back in October with Mr. Herbert and Mr. Hopkin, who basically could not answer some of the questions we had as to the square footage of the homes, which I can't understand how you would not know that. Being compatible with what is on our street currently. So that is one question I would like to have answered tonight. Also the number of garages, just because I need to know that. With all of this interest on this street, we've had a lot of people coming door to door, knocking, asking if we'd like to sell our homes. My concern is the front of this property that is vacant, open space right now, I believe is commercially zoned. I'm concerned and I'm worried for the section of Howell that something's up. And the reason why we were told on that October call that a street cannot be built off of Rantown Greenville Road was because our engineer felt that was not the best interest. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what we were told.
Sorry,
To
Ms.
me,
Ransom, who's engineer?
well, when I took it as our engineer, Howell Townships, told Mr. Herbert, Mr. Hopkin, it was not a good idea. That's what,
Yeah, I just want to make sure the record's straight. I'm sorry. I don't mean to stop you in your testimony.
that's okay.
Give us a second, because that I think is important. You mean the town engineer, or do you mean our board's engineer?
No, I think it was the town engineer. I
Okay.
think.
Ms. Newman, do you know if you've had any conversations with our town engineer, and has he brought up any concerns in regards to that?
I've absolutely coordinated with Mr. Yost of the engineering department, not necessarily specific to the design before the board today, but he did express concerns to me previously on the prior design, which had the basin which stretched across the rear of these lots, mainly.
Sorry, Ms. Newman, Ms. Ransom made a statement that our town engineer gave her some advice that maybe having a road coming off of Ramtown Road was not in the best interest of the design of the project. Can you confirm?
I can't speak to that. Mr.
Okay,
Yost and I
so
did
we-
not have conversations in that regard.
So it's hearsay at this point.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that,
Thank you,
but
Ms.
that's
Ransom. No, it's okay. Want to make sure that if we had the answer, we put it on the record.
okay. Okay, so I'm just crossing off as I'm just going through. I just have a couple more things.
Take your time.
Okay, so the other, of course, the biggest thing and concern is the basin. As of right now, the basin is completely full, and we have not had any major storms in the past few weeks. So that definitely is the biggest concern with this whole situation. And I do appreciate them changing things around, but as you know, in previous meetings, they were doing a different design with the water situation. I forget what it was called, but it was that the other drainage system, and now it's totally changed, which is good. I don't know the difference between permeable and all that, but the other question I do have, is there any developments that maybe Mr. Herbert or Mr. Hopkin can let us know that may have this permeable pavement? Because I'd really like to take a ride in that development and personally ask the neighbors there if they experience any kind of situation with flooding, because that is something I have not really seen in our town. So that's really most of my concern at this point. So just a couple questions and that's it. And thank you for taking the time to hear me.
No problem, my pleasure.
Do you want me to answer, Mr. Chairman?
If you feel there's a need to.
I'm just trying to go through my notes here. Thank you, Ms. Ransom. The aesthetic of the street, I know there was a concern early on about having the houses closer to the street. And so we listened to the members of the public, and we moved the houses back from the street in order to address that aesthetic concern. As far as the square footage of the homes, again, we're going to comply with the building envelope that is out there and comply with what the township requires. We haven't sat down and said exactly what our square footage is at this point. We have to see if we are granted an approval, what the building envelope will be, and then we'll have a home that'll have a certain square footage. But again, we want to try to fit into the neighborhood as much as possible. A number of garages, same thing. Walter, we don't have a number on the garages, do we?
No, it's we're showing a 2-car garage. I'm sure that would be subject. So just so the board and the public's aware, these are boxes which are traditionally shown as a footprint, a generic footprint, as we go through the planning board stage. Once these homes are sold to prospective homeowners, another specific plan for that individual lot would be created. It's called a plot and grading plan. Your township engineer would review it to make sure it's in conformance with these plans and any rules that are in place at that time. So that's when you would see a specific footprint, number of garages and bedrooms as such.
Thank you.
As far as the basin goes, I think we've made, we've stated all we know about the basin, that it will comply with a 100-year storm. And again, we leave it up to the board as to whether to, if a larger than 100-year storm comes, that either the pipe is used or the sheet flow is used. Again, we leave that up to the board. Permeable pavement, I can't point you to any particular site, but I'm an attorney, so I don't know of any, but that are right in your area right there. But I have been involved in some other projects in some other towns where we have the permeable pavement. It works very well.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ransom. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I have Dave Eskenazi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Eskenazi, can you remind us what your address is?
Sure, my address is 8 Michelle Boulevard.
And Mr. Eskenazi, you were previously sworn. Do you acknowledge you remain under oath?
I do. I've been on all these meetings.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I can vouch for
first
that.
thing, how are you, sir?
Good.
I'm not going to be, combative here. I'm just.
No, you listen. You guys have all been great, and I appreciate that. You really.
Okay, cool. The basin to the left of the basin that you guys are proposing is actually the middle school's basin. A lot of things have been brought up about the 100-year storm. Do you know when the last time we've had a 100-year storm? Has that been brought up in any type of research? When the last time this area's had a 100-year storm or any of that?
I went to law school because I can't do weather and stuff like that, or engineering or anything like that. I don't know. I apologize.
Okay, so none of it. Ms. Rubino,
maybe one of
may I
our
share my
last
screen?
hurricanes. I don't know.
Can I share my screen so you guys can see a few pictures?
Is there,
Is there?
is that appropriate? Can you please?
Well, I'd like you guys to be able to see the.
That's okay. We just I want to make sure there's legal precedence. That's all.
So, Mr. Eskenazi, if you share your screen, if it's a photograph, you're going to have to describe it for us, authenticate it for us, so that we know what we're looking at is legit. Okay.
I've opened several businesses. I've been through many planning boards. I know the ropes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I'll share screen.
And then, Mr. Eskenazi, is it possible afterwards, if we mark these, is it possible for you to then provide the copies to Eileen?
Sure, I'll email you, Elaine.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wait, my computer's asking me for system preferences to allow it. One second. Okay. Sure. Are we on?
Yes.
Okay.
So I am going to show you guys here this screen. This photograph here is the picture of the basin of the middle school. The woods there is the left piece of property of the Wadsworth property. So this is
Mr. Eskenazi, just so let's go through these one by one. So what you have on the screen now, it's titled IMG 2381.jpg. Can you describe if you took this photo, when you took this photo?
I took this photo about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So this is not, that's why I asked if you have a reference of a 100-year storm.
Okay.
So we have not had any 100-year storms.
It looks like the trees are in full leaf and just starting to fade. That would have been maybe October.
It would have been, yeah, whatever month this is. It's, hold on here. Let me pull up the exact thing. I took it, me and Joe Maurer took it. We were standing out there. So he has the exact date on it. I'll pull up exactly when it was. It says it's October 26th. So I work 7 days a week, so time flies by me. All right, so it's October 26th. We're standing on the hill of Michelle Boulevard, looking into the basin of the middle school, and then that faces the woods there. The
So
next
Eileen,
picture,
before you, Mr. President, before you go to the next picture, Eileen, how do we mark up, are we marking these as O exhibits?
We can mark them O1, O2.
Okay, so let's mark that first one will be marked as O1, and please, after the hearing this evening, can you please provide a copy to Eileen?
okay, next picture is same picture, same spot, looking in towards the middle school, so you have a better reference of where this is.
Okay, and this photo is IMG_2385.jpg.
Correct.
And we're gonna mark it as O-2.
Mhm.
Please proceed, Mr. Eskenazi.
And the last one, so you guys get to see what Michelle Boulevard looks like in some really good rain. Here is Michelle Boulevard flooded with cars actually caught in it. And this is the middle school retention basin flooding onto Michelle Boulevard. And there is
When was this picture taken?
this picture is from our last big storm that we had was August 13th, 2018.
So it was about 4 years ago.
Correct.
Okay, and so the picture that's up now, IMG_2379.jpg, we'll mark that as O-3.
The reason I wanted you guys to see these pictures is so you don't think that the whole entire block, me being the last one getting on here after the last 20 houses got on here to complain that we're crying wolf about the flooding that goes on here. We want you guys to see real picture of what is really going on this block. And if you like to see pictures of that basin after this, it's even worse.
If you have them,
Okay,
your testimony.
I'll stop the share there. So we go back to just the regular pictures. Next, the next point that I have here is Michelle Boulevard. I've been living over here in Ramtown for the last 16 years. I remember when this block was drawn up and when the first signs were starting to come through. And a lot of people had a lot of animosity, I guess, towards the block being built. And I used to live on Rutgers Drive right across the street, and we bought the house that was over here. There's 250 acres that was part of this Michelle Boulevard property, and only 23 houses were allowed to be built. So a question that I have for the board is, how do you allow 8 houses to be built on 8 acres and you're deeding, 10 acres or so just back to Greenland when we had 250 acres to go to only 23 homes? That doesn't seem like right. I think that should be equivalent of, 10%. So if there's 20 acres, they can only build 2 homes. It's the property just adjacent to us. They'll face the same exact flooding and issues that we have.
Does that conclude your testimony?
No, I was asking a question. How?
Well,
No answer to it?
the board's not gonna respond to that kind of question. I'm sorry, Ms. Eskenazi. That
All right, next I'd like to ask, what about construction timeline penalties so we don't face the same type of construction that's going on across the street? The construction straight across the street in front of the Jeepster Man property. Not you personally, but the planning board approved that, I'd say about 12 years ago now. I was at that planning board meeting when that was approved. And that piece of property sat vacant, cleared, mowed, plowed out for a good 8-9 years. And then about 2 years ago, they started to build the road out and then put a mountain of dirt, and it's been sitting that way for quite some time. So I know Mr. Herbert has said, of course they want to build the houses, they want to sell them, they want to go with it. But what type of construction penalties can be put in place so that this does not happen again?
I don't think Steve, I need your legal assistance here. I don't think the board has jurisdiction to put those penalties in place, do we?
No,
it's
if
built
this
in.
was, if this was a redevelopment, subject to a redevelopment plan or redevelopment agreement, then under those circumstances where there's a designated redeveloper, then he enters into a contract with the town, which has strict time schedules, perhaps restoration bonds if the work is not completed or if it's abandoned. But this is a traditional planning site plan application, subdivision application. There really are no construction timelines, time limits. Obviously, there's, if an approval is granted, that approval has vested rights for a certain number of years. But once a building permit is issued and the building permit is acted on, there is no timeline that I'm aware of. It could drag. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer, but that's the answer.
I get it.
Thank you.
And again, it's not in our interest to have it drag, or, it's in our interest to do this as quickly and expeditiously as possible. Just going back to the August 13, 2018 storm, I looked it up. It says it's newjersey.com as well as app.com talks about a torrential storm never seen. It talks about some people that never seen anything like it before, over 8 inches of rain in the area. And also, if you look at the pictures of the pond, the school pond, you'll notice there are trees that are living in the middle of it. I would think if the pond stayed wet all the time, those trees would drown and they would die. So I think that the school's pond does do its job from what I can see. And when I look on an aerial, several aerials, it shows that the pond is dry. So I think, while there may be some, there's a horrible event back on August 13, and there may have been some heavy rains just before that picture was taken. The other picture, the pond did eventually drain, and probably fairly quickly. So I would argue that the pond does do what it's supposed to do.
That actually, it outflows to our basin.
Well, in the one storm, it showed that, yes.
Another question I have, Sarah Quinones was on here earlier and she asked a few questions. What other properties does Wadsworth own, so we could see the quality of construction and thoroughness that they do, if any?
Again, we have not been asked to provide examples of other construction that has been done. I mean, if the board wants to make it a condition of approval that we present it to the town professionals, we can. But again, that wasn't a requirement of this application.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else from the public?
There is no one else with their hands raised. Now
Okay.
I just had someone raise their hand.
Okay.
Sir, can you state your name and address, please?
Yes, it's Rich Lanza, 44 Michelle Boulevard.
Were you previously sworn?
Yes.
Steve?
Oh, do you acknowledge you remain under oath, sir?
Yes.
Please proceed.
So I got a couple questions. One of them is, we keep going back to certain deed restrictions on whether it's the driveways or the trees. So I keep going back to how that's going to be policed, and how the township's going to have the additional resources to be able to monitor that driveways don't get sealed or trees aren't taken down. So I'd like to understand how the township's going to address that. The second piece is, and I know Mr. Ash mentioned about the permeable pavers. So I do have permeable pavers, and underneath those permeable pavers, I also have a drainage system. I have an area that is surrounded by other concrete and stone. Now you're talking, and it needs to be cleaned out all the time for it to be effective. Now you're talking about a driveway that is going to have sand and salt and anything you could think of coming from the debris of a car that's constantly going to be clogging this permeable driveway. So I like to understand how it's really going to be effective when the amount of debris that's going to be sitting on it and setting into those spaces where you either have a chip stone or something. Once it gets packed in with all this sand and dirt, you know, it's not effective anymore. So all that runoff is now going to come on to Michelle Boulevard. You know, I'm not sure how it, you know, having a deed restriction of and a maintenance of, you know, a sort of a maintenance schedule, how that's going to be enforced. So I'd like to understand that.
Any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, with regard to the deed restrictions, how it's enforced, we've gone through this a couple times. One of the other enforcement mechanisms would be is that if the house is sold, the applicant the person selling it would have to get a certificate of occupancy, a C of O. If the C of O inspection is done and it's found that there have been changes to the driveway that violate the deed restriction, then the C of O would not be issued and the property could not be sold. I think it's a pretty strong impetus, that the house owner would maintain the permeable driveway. Again, it'll also be enforced through the HOA and can be enforced by the township as well.
So, you know, if someone's going to be in that house for 15, 20, 30 years, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's not going to me, it's not going to be enforced, right? It's going to be, we're going to have a hard time enforcing it. Obviously, their own HOA is not going to enforce it. So the township has to step in. So the question is, does this township have the funds and the resources to have additional feet on the street to monitor these situations where it's going to impact the rest of the houses on Michelle Boulevard because of all the other water issues that we've had over the past 7-8 years? You know, so I think the town needs to take that into consideration and how that's going to be addressed. And if it's Michelle, the existing Woodmere community policing that, we're going to call the town and the township's going to come out and monitor this all the time. Every time we see that the runoffs the water's coming out to the road, how, you know, we need to understand how, I need to understand how Howell Township's going to be able to monitor that and enforce that.
Well, again, with all property ownership, there are all kinds of things that have to be monitored and enforced by the town, whether it's mowing of the lawn, trimming of trees, maintaining a home and so forth. And, you know, the town has many mechanisms to do that. And that is taken care of in that way. I mean, the town would also have the right to go in there themselves to correct the condition and place that expense against the property as a lien upon the property.
Mr. Herbert, why don't we see if any of our professionals have an opportunity to be able to answer that? Ms. Newman, Ms. Bell, Steve, anybody got anything, or is it really, that is really not something that this board needs to be reviewing and opining on?
I mean, I don't know that it falls under this board to review and opine on that we're talking about the long-term maintenance here.
Yeah, it's come up several times. You know, everybody's concerned, okay, the homeowners association does not do what they're supposed to do. Now we got to get the town involved to do some type of code enforcement. You know, what does that process look like? And I don't know if anybody on this board has the ability to provide the residents here that comfort and what the process should be. We're not the town. I mean, not the town code enforcement.
We don't, because it's not our jurisdiction, and we're in a land of something isn't being maintained 5 years from now, 10 years, whenever it is. Maybe it never happens. Maybe it does happen. But that's exactly the mechanism for it. It would go through code enforcement. As was indicated here, the porous pavement on the driveways, it's protected by deed. So that is deed disclosed to homeowners. Obviously, with the creation of an association, people or future homeowners would have to learn the understanding of the maintenance involved, no different than the Michelle Boulevard community has to do to maintain their own basin. As owners, their community is a little bit larger, but in this particular case, if something's not being maintained, this is a code enforcement issue. So it gets called into code. Code would have to confirm whether or not a person is adequately maintaining whatever the system is, and then take the appropriate actions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my concern there is it's not that their front lawn is too long. It has a potential impact of flooding an existing community that's had flooding issues, right? So.
But my point, well, in fairness though to this applicant, they have to do a drainage study. They have to ensure that their design, water currently flows to Michelle Boulevard. I understand that it's relatively flat, but there's a stormwater report that's prepared by the applicant's professionals, which shows what the existing flow is today to Michelle Boulevard from this community. Under the regulations, they have to reduce that. For a 2-year storm event, it's 50% of the rate. For a 10-year storm event, it's 75, 100-year, it's 80. They have to comply with that, and that's what they've represented that they've done. So the same water, I mean, water is going to be held back, and it's not going to overflow to Michelle Boulevard. Now, in the event something's not being maintained and something's not functioning consistent with this design, that's when it's a code enforcement issue.
Sorry, Mr. Lanza. I wish we had the expertise to tell you about, but that's the best we can do with these circumstances.
No, understood. I'm just having a hard time having a high traffic area using a permeable pavement. It's going to be constantly clogged. I mean, think about the amount of dirt and stuff that comes off your car after a snowstorm, right? All the sand that's on the street. You know, I just don't know how that's even feasible to say that it's going to be effective.
And I'm sure the board will take that into consideration, and we greatly appreciate your input on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, much appreciated. Thank you, and have a good night.
You too.
I have one more, Mike Andriola.
Oh. Mr. Andriola, can you please unmute your mic?
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Mr.
Thank you,
Andriola,
sir. I
can you
apologize
please-
for the inconvenience.
No problem, sir. Can you give us your street address?
Sure, 48 Michelle Boulevard, Howell, New Jersey.
Very good. Are you going to be providing testimony this evening or just asking questions?
I guess a little bit of both. I'll raise my right hand just to play it safe.
Sure. Mr. Andriola, do you swear from that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
So my wife and I, Vanessa, bought on Michelle Boulevard for very specific reasons. We looked at the property. It was surrounded by environmentally protected areas, a school system, and we were very comfortable that this was going to be our community, 23 houses, no more, no less. And unfortunately, at this point in time, we're being put in a situation where our community is being changed. There is being additional houses supposedly accessing our community that was never intended when we originally bought our property. There's no reason why this other development cannot access their homes via Ramtown Greenville Road. They just prefer to have access via Michelle Boulevard. We don't think that's a fair burden for us to have to bear. If there's a reasonable option for these homes to be accessed via Ramtown Greenville Road, we shouldn't be the ones that have to kind of bear the burden of them accessing their homes via our development. Every house on Michelle Boulevard, when we purchased, had to be over an acre of land. We had certain aesthetics we had to comply with. We couldn't have matching homes. We had to have certain restrictions we had to abide to. We pay an HOA fee, and we pay for a basin that doesn't really work. So we were bound by these commitments. We undertook them. We committed to them. That's our development. Now, all of a sudden, you're adding other homes into our development 10 plus years later that aren't even conforming to what we agreed to have our development look like. You're changing the configuration of a development that we committed to many years ago without any input from the people that originally committed to that purchase. And to me, that's just unfair. It's unreasonable, especially when there's an alternative. Whereas they can access that same development via Ramtown Greenville Road, as opposed to accessing their new development via our development. I just don't think it's fair for us to have to reconfigure our expectations when there's another option available to the developer. That's my main point. I'd love to hear your comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andriola. Counselor, it's up to you if you'd like to respond.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I completely understand Mr. Andriola's concerns, with regard to what they thought they were moving into when they moved into the neighborhood. I hear this. I represent a lot of boards myself. It's a concern I hear a lot from the public about what is really infill development coming into a neighborhood that is partially developed, and look, I mean, they thought they had a number of houses and more houses are coming in. So it's an issue to the neighbors, and it's completely understandable. But again, we are proceeding pursuant to township ordinances and regulations with a design we think is best suited for this site. I think we've made pretty good arguments about that. We have listened. We've met with the neighbors. We've listened to all of their concerns. We've redesigned the site pursuant to those concerns, moving the houses away from the road, readjusting the stormwater system. We've tried to do everything we can to accommodate both the concerns of the board and the neighbors. So again, I understand where they are coming from. They have my sympathies, but at the same time, we do have a right to proceed with a development of the property. The property has not been preserved for open space. It has been it has been zoned by the township for development, and we are seeking to comply with that ordinance.
Thank you. Anybody else have their hand raised?
No, they don't. Now someone did. Every time I say that, somebody raised their hand. We have Mike Corrigan.
Hi, Mr. Corrigan. Can you please provide us your street address?
Sure, it's Michael Corrigan, live at 12 Michelle Boulevard in Howell.
Corrigan, do you anticipate providing testimony this evening or just asking questions?
A little bit of both.
All right, let's swear you in. Mr. Corrigan, do you swear affirm that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
I live across from the pictures that Dave Esquenazi was posting, right across from the basin that's for the school. Those pictures were taken in 2018, but I actually have some pictures that I would like to show that was just from last week. April 19th storm. Wasn't in the APP, wasn't in anywhere where it was a crazy storm, but it's just an idea of the water issues we're having currently, and adding to them will make it even worse. So I just like to share my screen. I'm going to share the pictures, just kind of like how Dave did. They are dated, so you'll see them. Give me 1 second here.
So, Mr. Corrigan, while you're doing that, when you do put up a picture, we'll identify it, describe it, we'll assign it a number, and then we'll just ask you some questions about it to make sure it's an authentic photo. Okay.
No problem. I'm just not a crazy computer guy, so I'm trying to figure out how to share it to the Zoom meeting. So bear with me.
Yeah, that's should be a share button down in the bottom center.
Yeah, I'm down there. Let me see here. I'm gonna zoom you guys back out. Share screen, yes. Okay. Can you guys see my screen or no?
Yes.
So, Mr. Corrigan, we see that you have 3 photos. Shall we mark these as one exhibit?
That would be, I guess.
Okay,
discussion of
so,
the
so we're
attorney.
gonna mark this as exhibit O-4. There's 3 photographs. They're dated April 19, 2022, identified as pic1.jpg, pic2.jpg, and pic3.jpg. Mr. Corrigan, did you modify these pictures in any way?
No,
Or
I
also-
did not.
Did
No,
you
I did
take
not.
them, did you take them yourself?
I did.
And do these accurately depict the conditions on April 19th, 2022 when you took them?
Absolutely.
Okay, do you agree to provide electronic copies of these photos to Eileen, our board secretary, for the record?
100%. I'll email it to her. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, sir. Please proceed.
So I just wanted to show that this isn't just a random occurrence, you know, that this happens quite frequently. I wish I had more pictures to even show you, but we'll be here all night. So I just decided to take the most recent ones that I had to show them to you. This was not a crazy storm. This was just a, you know, a regular rainstorm, and this is what we're dealing with. That's my concern. We're going to beat a dead horse, keep talking about the water runoff, but I just want to make it a point that to the board that this is not just a random 100-year storm that barely occurs. This happens on a regular basis in our development, adding more problems. My concern is, I mean, I kind of jumped on late. I was sorry. I was doing a soccer game, but my concern is it sounds like the engineer that approved our basin is the same engineer that is going to work with the builder of this area. We already have a failed basin that's already an issue. So how can we guarantee that the engineering of their basin isn't going to cause more water problems already? You're telling me you engineered the heck out of this property. First and foremost, if we're taking it the wrong way, it still scares me, those terms, because we constantly are changing the drawings to fix water problems. So how do we know that this third or fourth or fifth drawing, I'm not sure how many we've actually had, is going to fix the water problem again? So I just reiterate that the board, please take these pictures, please take all the testimony from our neighbors, the water issues we're having, however that's going to happen, just please look into that. My other second concern is I feel like we're talking a lot about Michelle Boulevard and the development. We want to get these houses built. There's going to be a timeline that they're restricted to. My concern is the properties that are on Ramtown Greenville Road. Why are we not developing those 2 properties? Why are we only focusing on Michelle Boulevard? So if Michelle Boulevard gets approved, that's great, but why is the builder or the engineer not deciding to, you know, build those properties up? Why? Let's just put some paint on it. We're going to fix the roof. We're going to make it look new. I mean, currently, to put this on record, the home that's there now that's rented from the builder or whoever owns the property is running a mechanic shop out of the property. So how do we know that that's going to change? How are they going to make it better? That's my concern. What's the ultimate goal of those 2 properties? Does the builder or the engineer know what their plan is eventually going to be? Or is that just something they're just going to throw out later down the road? You know, my concern is development of just those properties also, aesthetically looking correct for the properties across the street that haven't been built. So that's kind of a question and a comment. I just thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If you could answer that, if you could, that would be great. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan. Those are all good questions, and thank you for your pictures. I think, Mr. Hopkin, that looking at the pictures I see here, the vegetation that's in the drainage basin looks to be fairly healthy in the middle there. So I would think that this drainage basin is doing what it's supposed to do. It pulls the water off of the property, holds it, and infiltrates it back into the soil. Is that what's going on here?
From 3 very specific photos, yes, that does appear to be functioning as intended.
So yeah,
So-
it's functioning as intended.
Not to change or make sure you guys are correct. That actual basin flows into our basin. So that water doesn't necessarily do what it needs to do because it goes into a failed basin that's supposed to be a dry basin. We already have problems with the property next to us also, where that flows in off of 10 Michelle Boulevard and flows back into there too. So We're already having this, it might look like it's doing what it's got to do. I mean, trees are going to grow in water. It doesn't matter if it flows in the right way. It might be working properly, but that water's still running into our basin. So if you add to that, that's either going to make that go higher, right? Water's going to go higher in that basin and then go back into our basin. So water's always going to find the lowest part it can go to. So that's my concern. It might look like it's functioning properly if that's what it's supposed to look like. But if you add to that, how do we know it's still going to function properly?
We've repeatedly indicated that we are not adding, we're reducing the runoff.
To go into the basin, you guys are structurally saying that your engineer is approving already that it failed on a failed already basin. Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page.
But again, the basin where the school is, that basin is functioning properly, it appears. And so will ours, and we are reducing the runoff. So we're doing everything we're supposed to do legally, and we're doing more. And I think we should emphasize this, is that we're not just going to the legal line, we're going beyond the legal line to make sure that, that this site works. If things are not operating optimally for the permeable driveway, as you say could happen, and we disagree, but if for some reason that happens, again, we are designing this so that we take care of that as well. That's why it's designed even further. And again, my words are being used differently, but we're designing it to a level that's even higher than is required. And that's what I meant when I made that statement before. So again, it's you heard from our engineer, you've heard from the board engineer. We are doing what we're supposed to be doing out there. And while you may believe that we will somehow exacerbate the situation.
Mr. Herbert, if I could just interject.
Sure.
We're just going to keep going round and round and round. But I think it's very clear what the public and the citizens that live in this neighborhood are concerned about. And at least for me, I've heard enough testimony from the citizens in order to provide me appropriate information to weigh the pluses and cons of this particular neighborhood. It's after 10 o'clock, getting close to 10:30. And it's up to you if you want to continue, if you think that you need for you to continue to provide additional testimony, but I think you've stated a couple times on how the drainage system will work, and your engineers as well.
Mr. Chairman, you are the boss. I am trying to provide what I can to help you with your decision making. That's my job, and I'm trying to make sure you're taken care of. So if you're satisfied that you've heard enough testimony in this issue, that is absolutely fine with our application.
I am always happy to hear what the public has to say and continue to hear what the public has to say, but I think you've provided enough testimony on that particular subject, and I'm not sure you're adding anything more at this particular.
I'm not sure I am either. Again, we've provided testimony that the system works and that we are compliant and that we will reduce the runoff.
And the board will have to wait.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I just want to know, instead of the water issue, is there an answer to what possibly might be happening to the two front properties that are Ramtown Greenville Road? Would that not help you in your decision making, knowing what that eventually might become?
I think they provided previous testimony, if I recall, at some of the past meetings. But Mr. Herbert, if you'd like to just summarize what the plan is for those two properties.
Right, and it's now 10:26, so I hope I'm clear with it. But after 10 it gets a little fuzzier. But again, this is the one property is open space. The other property has a existing house on it. We've already we've presented testimony that we are going to redevelop that house, clean it up, make it look good, and not have it be the eyesore that it is right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Corrigan, any other questions?
Nope. Just want to say thank you for your time, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan.
Okay, Eileen. Now,
there are no hands raised.
Okay.
Now we have another one. I wish people would just raise their hands so I know.
You're a good sport, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chair, in the sake of time of 10:30, if you're not gonna close it to the public, then we're gonna have to carry this application because I don't know how many more of us want to stay on past 10 o'clock as is. And now we're at 10:30.
I appreciate those comments, Mr. Nicastro. I was feeling the same thing. Can everybody in the audience, if you want to speak, can you please raise your hand now instead of at the end of it? So we know if you're going to speak. We want to hear you. And if we've got to carry the meeting to another meeting, we'll do so.
Well, Brian, with all due respect, I think what's happening, and I completely appreciate everybody chiming in from the public. I think it's very helpful for all of us. But I think what's happening is one of the neighbors is saying something and then it's triggering something else and somebody else, it just like kind of this domino effect that's going on and on and on. I appreciate all their efforts and all the testimony, but I think there's little things that just keep coming out. So it's either we're going to be here for another hour or we're carrying this to another meeting. That's your call, Mr. Chair.
I want to finish this application and be done, to be honest with you. I want to move on. We've seen it 4 or 5 times. I think we just got to be done with this. We either are going to approve it or we're going to deny it. And I think the applicant deserves the right to hear that. So I'm going to hold another 5 minutes. Let's see what the public says. And if we keep getting more and more, then we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing that was just stated, I just want to make sure it's clear, is from day one, this has been a compliant project with regard to stormwater. We have not redesigned it because of stormwater. We've only redesigned it to adhere to the requests of the neighbors and the board.
Ms. Newman, is that statement true?
It is true, Mr. Chairman, that the design does not require any relief as it relates to stormwater management regulations.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else from the public?
I have Jack Elbrick.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Albert, can you provide us your street address, please?
I'm at 10 Michelle Boulevard.
Okay, Mr. Albrecht, can you please raise your right hand? We're going to swear you in. Do you swear from that any testimony you provide before the board this evening will be the truth?
Yes, it will.
Thank you. So proceed.
All right. I'm sorry I got here. I had a softball game, and so I got here late. So I apologize for keeping the board and everybody on here. My statement is this. I live right across. I live actually next to Mr. Corrigan and Mr. Eskenazi. The basin for the school is right across the street from me. And I went over there when the school was out there dredging. So when I went over there and talked to the people doing that, I said, how many times have you had to dredge this in the past year? Now this is April. This is already the second time because so much flotsam is going in the basin and it's backing it up. So they find they're having problems also. So this is, once again, it's another issue about a basin. So if we're having an issue with this basin across the street, Michelle Boulevard's basin, listen, I'm not a rocket scientist and I'm not an engineer. I think there's going to be issues here. So we need to look at this long and hard. So, I mean, if anybody wants to go back to school and ask them about it, like I said, I didn't get anybody's names. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I just asked them that question. I also asked them last year how many times they had to do it. They had to do it 5 times last year. So there is issues. So that's something we need to be reviewed before we can go forward with this. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, Eileen, can we close it to the public?
Yes, there's no hands raised.
Okay. We'll close the public portion of the meeting. Mr. Herbert, you heard a bunch of concerns. Do you want to address those concerns? Do you want to summarize? Do you want to close? Do you want to complete your application? What do you want to do?
Given the hour, Mr. Chairman, I think that the board would appreciate a quick summary and we can proceed. Mr. Chairman, I think through all the testimony and that you've heard is that We have addressed all of the concerns. Again, this is the fourth meeting. We have redesigned this property to try to comply the best we can with both the concerns of the neighbors and of the board and the board's professionals. Again, I have to say the board's professionals have been terrific. They've really been helpful. And we have tried to make sure that we adhere to all of their all of their concerns. Again, you've heard testimony from Mr. Hopkin on how the site works from an engineering standpoint and why it was designed in the way it was designed, and why it will be a good addition to this neighborhood. You heard testimony from Mr. Osceola from a planning standpoint as to why a variance should be granted with regard to the basin on the open lot. Again, there's certain interpretations about that, but I don't want to counter Ms. Bell's interpretation. We look at it a little bit differently, but I would never question Ms. Bell. She's a terrific planner. So you heard testimony from Mr. Osceola as to why the D2 should be granted with regard to I'm sorry, the C2. I'm sorry for the late hour. The C2 should be granted for variance for that basin. And again, it's really as to the whole design of the lot, that the basin, placing the basin in this spot is the best for the overall design of it, and makes the whole development work in the best way possible, so as to not as to be a positive and not a negative. And finally, you also heard testimony from our environmental expert, Mr. Hunt, who testified as to the phase 2 review of the site and how we are complying under the LSRP. He is the LSRP. We are complying with all DEP requirements for cleanup of the site. There is an area right near the house that there's some contamination, probably from somebody changing oil or something like that. And that this area of earth, it's shallow and it'll be scooped out in accordance with DEP requirements and shipped off to a facility that takes care of that kind of thing. So, Mr. Chairman, again, we have done everything that we've been asked to do as an applicant to comply with the board's concerns, to comply with the ordinance's regulations. And we would like to now submit this application to the board with the assurance that if you do approve us, we will work hand in glove with the township, your professionals, and everyone else to make sure that this is a development that the township can be proud of. Thank you very much.
And you're just asking for preliminary, correct?
Correct. This is just preliminary.
Okay, if nobody on the board has any further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, it's Joe Cristiano. I'd like to make a motion to deny without prejudice because of the variance needed for the detention basement on the open space, the waiver needed for tree replacement, and the applicant's failure to properly address the maintenance and flooding concerns.
I'll second that motion.
Okay,
That was Mr. Nacastro.
Yes.
Thank you.
do we have any other motions to put on the record? Seeing none? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
You're muted, Paul.
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville.
Yes.
Before we go any further, Mr. Spanville has certified. He wasn't on the agenda as authorized, but he did certify. Ms. Talente
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Everyone have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, what do we do about Mama Solar? And I think that was the only one left on the agenda, right?
Yes.
We're gonna have to carry them.
I just brought Miss Chun in. She is the attorney for Monmouth Solar.
Evening, everyone.
We can hardly hear you.
Mr. John?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, given that it is, I'm not even sure what time it is anymore. It's 10:37. I'm not sure whether the board wants to hear our application at this point. We do have all our witnesses here with us tonight. But if it is, if the board does not, want to entertain hearing this tonight, we're okay with having this carried to the next meeting.
We're sorry, Ms. Chun.
That is okay. Occupational hazard.
I did already speak to Ms. Chun earlier and said if she starts, she may not finish. And I told her May 12th was available, so.
Okay.
If
And
we
all our professionals and witnesses are prepared to appear on the 12th. So I would only respectfully request that, to the extent possible, if we could be heard earlier on the agenda so that we're not stuck constantly having to bring back our professionals and not being heard.
Fair enough. It's a fair enough request.
Thank you.
Are we able to accommodate that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we need an extension of time?
No, they're good till June 18th.
Okay, Steve, you want to say your piece?
Just a question, is the meeting on the 12th going to be live or remote? Like
No, it's still remote. It's
Okay.
Zoom, and they've already noticed for Zoom hearing.
Okay, so I'm going to make a public announcement. If anybody's here interested in case SP-1099 Monmouth Solar 1 LLC, this application is being carried on notice to the board's next regularly scheduled meeting of May 12th, 2022, 7 p.m. It'll be Zoom remote, just like this evening. There will not be any further mailed notice or published notice. Again, solar is being carried to May 12th, 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, Ms. Chun.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, master plan update, I don't need to go through. We're having our special meeting on the 5th. Everybody, please read the documentation that was issued in regards to the master plan and come ready for comments. Anything else do we need to talk about or go to executive session? Steve?
I'm not aware of any Ron didn't give me anything to tell you guys in executive session. I guess not.
With that being said, I want to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.